The fairy lights strung through the ancient oaks of Maison de Magnolia dripped gold onto the manicured lawn, but they didn't reach my table. I was at table 14, a polite little placard informing me I was in the extended family section. In reality, it was the social leper colony, tucked so close to the catering entrance that I could smell the shrimp scampi warming in the chafing dishes and hear the clatter of plates. A live jazz band was playing something upbeat from the 20s, but out here, it was just a muffled thump-thump-thump against the rising coastal wind. I smoothed the skirt of the dress, a silk sheath the color of a summer bruise. It belonged to my best friend, Zadie Quinn, and I'd spent a good 20 minutes wrangling the zipper, which had a nasty habit of sticking just below the shoulder blades. The hem, I knew, was held up by a line of careful, nearly invisible stitches Zadie had applied just last night. A quick glance at my phone confirmed no new messages, just the lock screen my son, Jonah, 5 years old, grinning a gappy-toothed smile and holding a tower of Legos almost as tall as he was. A ripple of laughter came from table 6. My cousin, the bride, was radiant, and I was here. She really should have finished her degree, someone whispered from the next table over, a cluster of my mother's second cousins. Such a shame. Architecture was a good path before, well, you know. Before I got pregnant, before my entire life plan imploded, my phone buzzed in my lap and I flinched. My mother, I wish you'd brought someone. Honey, your uncle said there are so many nice men from the groom's side. I squeezed my eyes shut. Nice was code for employed and willing to take on baggage. My baggage, a 28-year-old single mother with half an architecture degree and a part-time job as a home health aide. A shadow fell over me, and I looked up into the face of Caleb Pryor. My ex-husband, he was here as the property manager for the bride's family, his suit looking sharper, his smile more practiced than when we were together. He had that look on his face I'd come to despise, a watery blend of pity and, beneath it, a tiny, hard kernel of triumph. See, it said. I landed on my feet. You're still falling. Tessa, he said, nodding, his voice slick with feigned politeness. Good to see you out. Caleb. I didn't smile. I didn't have the energy. He lingered for a half-second too long, just long enough to take in the borrowed dress and my isolation, before gliding away, back toward the epicenter of the party. I felt the familiar, hot sting behind my eyes. I would not cry. Not here. As if on cue, the humid Charleston air shifted, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of salt and low tide, and the golden lights in the oaks began to sway violently. The first fat, cold drops of rain began to fall. Guests let out little shrieks, waiters rushing to move the champagne tower indoors. I saw my opening in this chaos. No one would notice the single mom from table 14 making an escape. I gathered my small clutch, my phone warm in my hand. I was halfway to my feet when a man stepped out from the main house's private veranda, a section roped off for the innermost circle. He was tall, and his black tuxedo was cut so perfectly it seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin. He moved with a kind of predatory grace, all sharp angles and controlled power. He paused to speak briefly to the bride's father, who suddenly looked less like the host and more like an employee taking instructions. Then the man turned. His eyes, even from 20 feet away, were a cold, flat gray, a thin scar, white and fine as a thread, cut diagonally across his left cheekbone. This was Rafe Bellamont. I didn't know the name, but I knew the whispers. A merchant family from New Orleans, with roots in Corsica, the kind of merchants who didn't use storefronts. His gaze swept the panicked crowd, not scanning but assessing, and then it stopped. On me. It wasn't a glance. It wasn't a look over. It was a full, undivided stop, as if he'd been looking for me specifically and had just found me. My breath hitched. He didn't smile. He just held my gaze as he began to walk, weaving through the scattering guests, parting the crowd without seeming to touch anyone. He reached my table in a few long strides. The air around him smelled like cedar and the ozone of the coming storm. Without a word, without asking, he pulled out the chair opposite me, the one Caleb had stood beside, and sat down. Up close, he was overwhelming. The set of his jaw was stubborn, the scar more pronounced. He looked at me for another 3 seconds, a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," he said. His voice was a low baritone, gravel and velvet, with an accent I couldn't place. A bitter laugh escaped me. "I'm used to it." "Then lend me a few hours," he said, his gray eyes unblinking. "Pretend you're my wife, and dance with me." My jaw must have dropped. Of all the things I expected, a bizarre, theatrical proposition wasn't one of them. That's no... A corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. He inclined his head, just slightly, toward the main house, where the bride's father was now talking animatedly to 2 men in dark suits with earpieces venue security. "They just called security on me," Rafe said, his voice dropping even lower. "They're nervous, but if you're Mrs. Bellamont," he let the implication hang, "their entire posture will change." "Why?" I managed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Why me?" "Because you're not looking at anyone else," he said simply, "and because you look like you need an escape as much as I need a cover." Before I could answer, another shadow fell over us. Caleb, he was back, his face a mask of smug chivalry. "They're moving the music inside. Tessa," he said, pointedly ignoring Rafe. He held out his hand. "Since you're unescorted, one dance for old time's sake." The pity was back, thick and suffocating. He was offering me charity. A sudden, impossible warmth spread across my lower back. Rafe Bellamont hadn't moved from his seat, but his hand was now resting possessively at the base of my spine. His touch a silent, definitive claim. The heat of it shot straight through Zadie's silk. "I'm sorry," Rafe said, his voice smooth as steel. His gray eyes met Caleb's, and for the first time, I saw my ex-husband flinch. "My wife already has an engagement." Caleb's face went white, then blotchy red. He looked from Rafe to me and back again, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He saw the hand on my back. He saw the man wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my car. He saw the lie, but he was powerless against the sheer, arrogant confidence of the man telling it. Caleb stammered something and practically fled. Rafe's hand didn't move. His gaze returned to me. "Well, Mrs. Bellamont." My brain was screaming 1,000 different warnings. This is insane. This is dangerous. He's not just a merchant. But my heart, my stupid, tired, humiliated heart, was pounding a different rhythm. For one night, for one dance, I wouldn't be poor Tessa. I wouldn't be the girl at table 14. I made the most impulsive decision of my life. I placed my hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and dry. He stood, pulling me to my feet with an effortless strength. Just then, as we moved toward the light of the main house, the jazz band, now safely relocated, shifted gears. The frantic 20s tune melted away, replaced by the slow, sultry beat of a ballad. He led me to the edge of the improvised dance floor. The whispers had already started, but they were different now. Not pity, confusion, curiosity, envy. Rafe turned me to face him, one hand settling on my back where it had been before, the other enveloping my hand. We began to move. He was a good dancer, economical and sure, leading me without any sense of force. I was dizzy, caught in the scent of cedar and rain and the impossible reality of the situation. I looked past his shoulder, scanning the room. My mother was staring, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. And then I saw him, standing near the French doors. Apart from the crowd was another man. He was younger than Rafe, dressed in a fashionable, narrow-lapelled suit, all Silicon Valley sharpness. He watched us, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. His lips were curved in a faint, knowing smirk. Silas Kincaid. I recognized him from a business magazine Zadie had left at my apartment. A tech investor, notorious and ruthless. Rafe must have felt my focus shift. He pulled me a fraction of an inch closer, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. His warm breath sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the storm. "I need someone to silence this room tonight," he whispered, his voice a private rumble just for me. "In return, I'll make everyone stop pitying you." We danced. The rain hammered a rhythm on the awning outside, a counterpoint to the saxophone. My heart, which I thought had forgotten how, was hammering a new beat, one that matched the storm, one that matched the man holding me. The cinematic opening of my night had ended, and as we turned, my gaze locked for a split second with Silas Kincaid's. His smirk widened, the ballad softened, coasting to an end on a long, breathy saxophone note. I expected Rafe to release me, maybe offer a curt "thank you," and melt back into the crowd, leaving me to field the confused stares. He did the opposite. His hand remained a solid point of heat on my back. He didn't let go. Instead, he applied the slightest pressure, guiding me not toward the exit, but toward the very epicenter of the party, the main table, where the bride's parents were holding court. The whispers that had followed our dance didn't just stop, they reversed. The air felt like it had been sucked out of the room. Every eye locked on us. I felt the burn of 100 stares, but for the first time, none of them were tinged with pity. They were shocked. They were envious. "David," Rafe said, his voice effortless as we approached the bride's father. David was the man I'd seen speaking nervously to security just moments before. "My apologies for the interruption earlier. Allow me to properly introduce my wife, Tessa Bellamont." Tessa Bellamont. He said it with such casual, indisputable ownership that a jolt went straight through my borrowed dress. It sounded real. It sounded permanent. David's jaw nearly unhinged. The suspicion that had been radiating off him vanished, replaced by a frantic, almost oily smile. "Mr. Bellamont, please. We had no idea. An absolute honor, a true honor." He turned to me, his eyes wide, practically bowing. "Mrs. Bellamont, welcome." The social transformation was immediate and absolute. It was like watching a chemical reaction. The second cousins who had been dissecting my life choices from the next table over were now smiling, their faces stretched in panicked congeniality. I saw my mother pushing through the small crowd, her face a mask of stunned, ecstatic disbelief. "Tessa, honey," she whispered, her eyes darting from me to the man whose hand was still resting proprietary on my back. She quickly recovered, turning the full wattage of her smile on Rafe. "Oh, you must be well. Welcome. Welcome to the family. Can I get you a drink, son-in-law?" Son-in-law? I nearly choked on my own breath. Rafe was impossibly smooth. He declined the drink with a grace that made it sound like a compliment. "David was just asking about the expansion," he said, effortlessly steering the conversation away from me and onto safer, if not entirely truthful, ground. I keep telling him, Bellamont Logistics is just in the business of dry storage, simple containers. He smiled, a quick flash of white in the dim, golden light. "All these rumors about New Orleans, you know how people talk." He was dismissing a lifetime of organized crime whispers as idle gossip, and this entire collection of Charleston high society was eating it up. I stood there, a silent accessory, his hand a permanent fixture at the small of my back. I should have been terrified. I should have been pulling away, correcting the lie, running, but I was breathing. For the first time in what felt like 6 years, the crushing, suffocating weight of being poor Tessa was gone. It was replaced by shock, a dizzying curiosity, and a strange, heady dose of respect. I wasn't the charity case from table 14. I was Mrs. Bellamont. I hated the deception, but God, I loved the effect. Across the room, I caught Caleb's eye. He was standing with a groomsman, his face thunderous, his skin blotchy and red. I clearly saw him mutter, "She's acting. It's all an act." Rafe, who wasn't even looking in that direction, somehow heard him. His grip on my back tightened, Just a fraction, and a slow, cold smirk touched his lips before vanishing. He didn't even grant Caleb the dignity of a glance. The storm, which had been a threat, now arrived in force. The rain began lashing the windows of the main house, a furious drumming that almost drowned out the jazz trio. The string lights outside swayed violently, and the lights inside the ballroom flickered once, twice, casting the room in a bizarre strobe effect. "Your wife? That's a new development. Rafe." The voice was different, sharper, drier, laced with an amusement that felt more dangerous than Rafe's silence. Silas Kincaid had materialized at Rafe's elbow. He was the man from the doorway, the tech investor. He held his glass of amber liquid, the ice clinking softly. He didn't look at Rafe. He looked at me, his eyes analytical, cold, like I was a balance sheet he was auditing for flaws. "Silas," Rafe acknowledged. His posture didn't change, but the air around him went from cool to arctic. "Congratulations," Silas said, the word dripping with insincerity. He finally turned his gaze back to Rafe. "Now, since you're in a mood for announcements, when are you publicizing the Mirage Key merger? Or are we still pretending you don't want that deep water access?" My breath caught in my throat. Mirage Key. I wasn't in architecture anymore, but I still read the local business section. It was the single most valuable undeveloped stretch of waterfront left in Charleston, a logistical gold mine. Rafe smiled, but it was all teeth. About the same time, the Crescent Private Port Council stops misplacing paperwork and delaying routine zoning, I imagine. His voice was velvet smooth, but the message was clear. Things just get so complicated down there. The tension between them was so thick I could barely breathe. This wasn't a chat between rival businessmen. This was a chess match, and I had just been slammed down onto the board, positioned as Rafe's queen, a fake one, but a queen nonetheless. I bit my lip, hard, the metallic taste of adrenaline flooding my mouth. I had stepped out of my league, out of my zip code, out of my entire life. The lights flickered again, buzzed angrily, and then died. The room plunged into near darkness, illuminated only by the green emergency exit signs and the brilliant, terrifying flashes of lightning outside. The music died with a sharp electronic whine. A collective gasp rose from the guests, followed by nervous laughter. Before I could even react, Rafe's hand moved from my back to my arm, his grip firm. "Come with me," he murmured. His voice low and urgent, meant only for me. He didn't wait for an answer, pulling me through the throng of confused guests, away from Silas, away from my mother, toward the large French doors leading to the covered veranda. He pushed open the door, and the roar of the storm hit us like a physical blow. The wind was horizontal, whipping my hair across my face and plastering the thin silk of my dress to my legs. We were sheltered by the deep overhang of the porch, but the air was wet and cold. He let go of my arm but stood close, his body shielding me from the worst of the wind. The only light came from the lightning, freezing us in flashes of white and black. "Okay," I said, my voice shaky, but I was surprised to find it was angry, too. "The dance is over. What the hell is going on, Mirage Key? The Port Council. Who are you?" "I helped you," he said, cutting me off. His gray eyes caught the reflection of the lightning, looking like polished steel. Those looks are gone. They're not pitying you anymore. They're wondering how you landed me. "And I helped you," I shot back, finding a sliver of courage in the chaos. "You needed a wife to stop security from hauling you out of here in front of your rival. A fair trade," he nodded, a flicker of approval in his gaze. "I quieted your demons. You quieted mine, for tonight." "And after," I asked, the word hanging in the wet, heavy air, "after tonight." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression completely unreadable in the dark. "After tonight, I return you to your life. We're two strangers who danced at a wedding." He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a simple, impossibly elegant business card. It was thick, cream-colored stock, with just a name, Rafe Bellamont, no title, just a New Orleans number. He pressed the card into my palm, his fingers warm against my cold skin. I pay my debts. Tessa, that's your life back there. He nodded toward the dark ballroom. But this, he tapped the card, this is if you ever need me to be Mr. Bellamont again. Don't call it unless you mean it. I stared at the card. Excuse me, sir, ma'am. A young waiter, barely 20, came stumbling out of the dark doorway, carrying a heavy tray of empty champagne flutes. He slipped on the wet flagstones, lurching forward, the entire tray tilting. Whoa, I reacted instinctively. My part-time job as a home health aide meant I'd caught falling patients more times than I could count. I dropped the card and grabbed the waiter's arm, steadying him and the tray before the glasses went flying. Easy. You okay? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, the floors, it's just really slick. He was pale, shaking, clearly terrified of his boss. As I let go of his forearm, his sleeve, wet from the rain, slid up an inch. My fingers brushed against a tattoo on the inside of his wrist. It wasn't intricate, but it was precise, a simple, stylized image of a sun, with sharp rays radiating from it, but the center of the circle was empty. A hollow sun. My blood went ice cold. My heart, which had been hammering from adrenaline, now gave a sick lurch. I knew that symbol. I'd seen it on a mandatory PowerPoint presentation just 2 weeks ago. The home health agency I temped for, Low Country Care, had been suddenly bought out. The new owners were a faceless equity fund, a shell corporation. And that hollow sun, the logo for the parent company. Helios Syndicate was on every slide. Helios, a tech and finance conglomerate. The rumors in the office were that they were aggressive. And just yesterday, my supervisor, a woman I'd never met in person, had emailed me a stack of digital patient files, asking me to re-verify and sign off on them. The dates were wrong. The billing codes were inflated for procedures that never happened. They weren't adjusting the books, they were committing fraud. I hadn't signed them. I looked at the waiter, who was scrambling to pick up a single glass that had fallen. I looked at Rafe, who was watching me. His eyes narrowed, missing nothing. I looked back at the hollow sun tattoo, disappearing under the waiter's cuff. My intuition, the one that screamed at me when Jonah was about to climb too high or when a patient's vitals were about to crash, was blaring like a fire alarm. Silas Kincaid was a tech investor. Helios Syndicate was a tech and finance conglomerate. Was this waiter just a kid with a trendy tattoo? Or was he part of their world? And was he here because of Rafe or because of me? The lowly home health aide who hadn't signed the fraudulent files. Before I could process the terrifying thought, Rafe's phone vibrated in his pocket. It wasn't a polite buzz. It was a deep, angry rattle against his ribs. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen. His entire demeanor, which had been controlled and cool even with Silas, shattered. His face darkened into a mask of pure, cold fury. He turned away from me, pressing the phone to his ear. "What?" he snapped, his voice a low command. He listened for a moment, his shoulders tensing. "Where how many?" "The Delta Regional Commerce Oversight, they don't have that jurisdiction, do you?" He paused, listening again, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle jumped in his scarred cheek. "They were sent. Lock it down, not one crate moves, and find out who made the call. Now." He hung up, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. "Rafe," I whispered. He turned to me, the storm in his eyes far more terrifying than the one raging over Charleston. He looked past me, toward the dark, chaotic party, and then back at me, his gaze intense, decisive. "The game changed," he said, his voice flat. He grabbed my hand, not the polite, warm grip from the dance floor. This was hard, urgent, and non-negotiable. "You're coming with me." "What, I can't," I said, pulling back. "My son, I have to get home. Zadie's watching him, but—" "That waiter, Kincaid, this phone call. It's connected." He was already pulling me toward the veranda steps, away from the main party, into the rain. A truck full of my merchandise just got randomly inspected by a department that has no business inspecting it. That means Kincaid is done playing at the party. His eyes locked on mine. It is no longer safe for you to be sitting alone tonight. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I fumbled for it, my other hand still locked in his. It was a text from Zadie. Hey, hope the wedding isn't too awful. Jonah is out like a light. He's fine here. He's got his Legos for the morning. Don't rush back. XO. A wave of relief washed over me. So strong, my knees almost buckled. Jonah was safe. He was with Zadie. But that relief was instantly replaced by a new, sharp fear. Rafe was right. This wasn't a game. The hollow sun on the waiter's arm, the fraudulent files on my laptop, Silas Kincaid, Rafe's truck. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Okay. He didn't pause. He pulled me down the steps, directly into the driving rain, ignoring the manicured path. We were heading for the kitchen exit, the same one I'd been watching all night, the one I'd planned to use for my own escape. He grabbed a large, black umbrella from a stand by the service door, snapping it open with a violent thwack. He held it over my head, pulling me tight against his side. His tuxedo jacket was already soaked, the expensive fabric clinging to his shoulders, but he didn't seem to notice the cold. We slipped out the back gate, past the steaming dumpsters and the rattling catering vans, leaving the golden lights, the muffled jazz, and the entire life I'd known just an hour ago behind in the storm. We were two shadows disappearing into the rain-slicked Charleston night, leaving only a wake of confused, whispering guests. The heavy silence in the Bentley had lasted for hours, a thick, pressurized void broken only by the rhythmic thwack of the windshield wipers and the distant rumble of the storm we were outrunning. We'd crossed state lines in the dark, leaving Charleston and South Carolina so far behind it felt like another life. My borrowed dress was damp and wrinkled, sticking to my skin. My entire world had been table 14, and now I was crossing the endless, churning darkness of Lake Pontchartrain, the lights of New Orleans, a hazy, sulphurous glow on the horizon. Rafe hadn't spoken more than 100 words since we'd fled the kitchen exit. He'd simply pointed the nose of the massive car south and driven, his scarred profile illuminated only by the faint green glow of the dashboard. I was exhausted, terrified, and vibrating with a strange, displaced energy. The city rose up to meet us, not with the genteel, manicured beauty of Charleston, but with a humid, heavy breath. The neon signs of the French Quarter were blurred, their colors bleeding onto the wet asphalt in long, watercolor strokes. He didn't drive to a house. He pulled into the private, covered entryway of a hotel, L'Argent. It was old-world opulent, all black marble and gas lanterns, but there was no doorman rushing out. Just two men in dark suits who materialized from the shadows, their faces impassive. They didn't look like hotel security. They looked like they owned the shadows. One of them opened my door. Rafe was already out, his hand on my elbow, guiding me inside. The lobby was hushed, smelling of old money, expensive cigars, and damp wool. We didn't go to a check-in desk. He led me straight to a private elevator, its brass doors closing with a heavy, final thud. The penthouse suite was enormous, a sprawling space of dark woods, leather-bound books, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Mississippi. A churning, dark ribbon below. The rain lashed against the glass. "You're safe here," he said. It wasn't a reassurance. It was a statement of fact. He was shrugging out of his soaked tuxedo jacket, his white shirt stark against the dim light. "Safe from what?" I asked, my voice small. From Silas Kincaid, from a random truck inspection, from a waiter with a tattoo, from all of it. He walked to a bar, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a heavy crystal glass. He didn't offer me one. He set the glass down and turned to face me. "This is my city, Tessa. My rules. You're under my protection, which means you need to know what they are." I just stared, clutching Zadie's borrowed purse to my chest. "Rule 1, he said, holding up a finger. "I don't involve myself with innocents. I don't touch women or children. What happened to my truck tonight was business. You getting dragged into it was an anomaly, one I will correct." Rule 2. I pay my debts. I told you that. You helped me at the wedding. This, he motioned to the lavish room, is me paying you back. Protection, safety, until this is over. He paused, his gray eyes seeming to pin me to the spot. And Rule 3. I do not sell illusions. I'm not a nice man. I'm not the answer to your mother's prayers. I am exactly what I appear to be. What happened tonight, the Mrs. Bellamont act, it was a tool. It's over. The words stung, a cold, sharp slap of reality. He was dismissing me. After all this, after pulling me across 3 states, he was putting me back in my box. I'm not an idiot, Rafe, I said, and I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. I know what an act is. I've been acting my whole life. Acting like I'm fine. Acting like I'm not drowning. I took a step toward him. But I don't want to be an illusion in your story. I'm not one of your anomalies. My name is Tessa Morin, and I think I'm in real trouble. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a raw bolt of fear, colder than the rain, shot through me. It wasn't Zadie. It was an unknown number. I opened the text. It was a picture, me and Rafe, dancing just hours ago. His hand was on my back, my head tilted up toward his. It was intimate, cinematic, and underneath it, a single line of text. Bellamont's new toy. Be careful it doesn't break. I must have made a sound, a small, choked gasp. My hands started to shake so badly I almost dropped the phone. What is it? Rafe was across the room in 2 strides, his hand closing over my wrist, turning the phone so he could see the screen. I watched his face. The cold control didn't break, but a new, darker energy radiated from him. His jaw tightened, the scar on his cheek standing out white against his suddenly flushed skin. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the picture, and then at me. They have my picture, I whispered, the reality crashing down. They know who I am. They were watching me. A sharp, professional knock echoed from the suite's double doors. Rafe let go of my phone, his expression hardening back into a mask of command. Come in. The door opened, and a woman stepped inside. She was tall, slender, with severe, dark hair pulled back into a tight chignon. She wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, and her eyes, behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses, were sharp and missed nothing. She held a tablet in one hand. Anwen, Rafe said in greeting. Rafe. Her voice was crisp. All business. She glanced at me for a single, evaluative second before turning her full attention back to him. The truck at the Charleston crossing is a loss. The oversight team was a shell. Hired muscle. They seized the cargo medical equipment, just as the manifest said, but they were really planting trackers. We're sweeping all other assets in the region. It was Silas. Rafe said, it wasn't a question. It was Helios, she corrected him, tapping her tablet. Your appearance at the wedding spooked him. He's accelerating his play for Mirage Key. He's buying shares. He's been buying them for 6 months, Anwen said, her voice flat, using a series of offshore shells, all funneling back to a single Helios-controlled fund. He doesn't just want the key, he wants a fully digitized, automated port. He wants a monopoly on all shipping data coming into the Atlantic. Your Bellamont logistics is the only thing in his way. Rafe was silent, staring out the window at the rain. He sent me a message tonight, through her. Anwen's sharp eyes flicked back to me. This time, her gaze lingered. A soft target. He's testing your perimeter, seeing if you'll protect her. It's a pressure tactic. A soft target. Bellamont's new toy. I felt sick. I wasn't a person. I was a tactic. I am not a pawn, I said, my voice shaking. I was speaking to both of them. I'm not part of your game. Rafe turned from the window, and he walked over to me, stopping just a foot away. His proximity was overwhelming. He'd put his jacket back on, but I could still smell the rain and the cedar on him. You became a part of it the moment that waiter saw you recognize his tattoo, Rafe said, his voice low and intense. You were a part of it when you didn't sign those fraudulent files. You just didn't know you were on the board. He looked at Anwen. She stays. Full priority. Anwen nodded once, a curt, professional acceptance, and left as silently as she had arrived. The silence that descended was heavier this time, charged with the unspoken threat. "I only ask one thing of you," he said, his gaze fixed on mine. "Not as Mrs. Bellamont, as Tessa, that card I gave you. It's not for an act, it's for real. You call me, you don't get a strange text, you don't see a hollow sun. You don't get a weird email from your boss without calling me first. Do you understand?" Yes. My throat was dry. He nodded, the tension easing from his shoulders just a fraction. He gestured to a hallway. "There's a guest suite. You should sleep." But I didn't move. I walked past him, to the tall glass doors leading out to the balcony. I needed air, even if it was wet and heavy. I slid the door open and stepped out. The wind was fierce, whipping my hair into my eyes, but it felt real. The city spread out below, a glittering, dangerous map. I heard him step out behind me. We stood there for a long time, side by side, close but not touching, watching the storm move over the river. The humidity was so thick it felt like we were breathing water. A jagged fork of lightning split the sky, illuminating the city in a brilliant, unearthly white. In that flash, I saw his face, not as the calculating boss, but as something else. The hard lines around his mouth had softened. "My mother," he said, his voice quiet, almost lost in the wind. "Marina Bellamont. They called her the Sea Countess. She ran these ports for 30 years. She's the one who built Bellamont Logistics from what it was before." I turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. "She taught me," he continued, his gaze lost on the horizon, "that any fool can run a family with a gun, but it takes brains to run one with a ledger. She hated waste. She hated unnecessary conflict. She believed in boundaries." "What happened to her?" I asked, keeping my voice just as soft. "She knew her boundaries," he said, a note of deep, old pain in his voice. "She died of cancer in a hospital bed, not in a gutter, a rare thing in my world. She made it." We were quiet again. He had shared something real. I felt I owed him the same. "My son," I said, my voice thick. "Jonah, he's 5. He likes to build. Blocks, Legos, anything. He wants to build a whole city, and he never stops asking why. Why is the sky blue? Why do cars need wheels? Why did Daddy leave?" I hadn't meant to say that last part. It just slipped out. Rafe turned his head, his gray eyes meeting mine in the dark. The distance between us, the closer than necessary space, was electric. "He sounds smart," Rafe said. "He is," I whispered. As if summoned by the tension, the wind howled, the city's emergency sirens suddenly wailed in the distance, a rising, mournful chorus, a weather alert. The storm was intensifying. And right on cue, my phone, which I was still clutching, vibrated. My heart seized. Not an unknown number. It was an email from Low Country Care Services. My supervisor? "Dear Tessa, we've been trying to reach you. We need your final signature on the Q4 patient files. We've made it convenient. Our mobile processing office will be stationed at the Eclipse Bell Floating Casino tomorrow night from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. Your prompt compliance is required to finalize your quarter-end bonus payment." My blood ran cold. A floating casino, a mobile office, a bonus payment I'd never been offered. "It's a trap," Rafe said. He'd read the email over my shoulder, his voice a low growl. "They're luring you onto their territory. You walk on that boat, you don't walk off." I looked at the email. I looked at the dark, churning river below. And then I looked at him. My fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but something new was mixing with it. Anger, a cold, sharp rage I hadn't felt since Caleb left. They were using me. They were using my patience, and they were threatening me. "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's a trap." I turned to face him, the wind plastering my hair to my cheek. "And it's an opportunity. If they're that desperate for my signature, if they're stupid enough to correct the files on a mobile server," I saw the understanding dawn in his eyes. "The data will be there," I finished. "The original files, the altered ones, the proof. Rafe stared at me, a long, calculating look, a slow, dangerous smile, the first real one I'd seen, spread across his face. "They're inviting you onto a boat," he said. "My territory is the water." He took a step back, gesturing me inside, out of the rain. "Anwen," he called, his voice booming with a new, sudden energy. We walked back into the suite, dripping water onto the priceless rugs. He strode over to a massive, polished mahogany desk and pressed a button on an intercom. "Get me the schematics for the Eclipse Bell, full structural, security, and network," he ordered. A moment later, Anwen was back, her tablet projecting a glowing, blue-lined map onto the glass-topped coffee table. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, casting our shadows long and sharp. Rafe and I leaned over the table, our heads close, the map of the casino ship glowing between us. I could feel the warmth radiating off his skin, and I realized I wasn't breathing. I could feel his breath, warm and steady, on my temple. "We go in," he said, his voice a low command. "But not as rats. We go in as high rollers. You're not going to be Tessa Moran, the home health aide. You're going to be Tessa Bellamont, my wife, and you're going to walk out of there with everything they have." The Eclipse. Belle wasn't just a boat. It was a floating palace of glass and neon, moored in the dark, churning water of the Mississippi. It looked like a slice of Vegas had been carved out and dropped into the bayou. Rook, Rafe's driver, a man who hadn't said a single word and looked like he was carved from granite, idled the black sedan at the VIP drop-off. "Anwen is on the floor, 5 by 5, a voice crackled, impossibly tiny, in my ear. Milo, the tech specialist, he was already inside. "Rook, stay liquid. Rafe, Tessa, welcome to the party." I took a shaky breath. I was no longer in Zadie's borrowed silk. Rafe had provided a new dress, a simple, lethally elegant black sheath that fit like it had been sewn onto me. My hair was pulled back. I looked the part. I felt like an imposter. "Tessa." Rafe's voice, low and calm beside me. I turned. He was holding out his hand, palm up. Lying on his palm was a heavy, simple gold band. "It's cold," he warned. I stared at it. "For the part." "For the part." He agreed. He didn't put it on my finger. He just held it out. I picked it up. It was cold and heavy. I slid it onto the ring finger of my left hand. It was a perfect fit. A small, almost invisible muscle in his jaw twitched. "Let's go." He didn't take my arm. He placed his hand on the small of my back, just as he had at the wedding. But this time, it wasn't a claim. It was a shield. We walked past the velvet ropes, the bored-looking security guards nodding at Rafe with a deference that was chilling. We were expected. The casino floor was a nightmare of noise and light, bells, shouting, the endless electronic jingle of 100 machines. Anwen, in a cocktail dress, materialized at my elbow, smiled as if greeting an old friend, and whispered, "Office is 3rd deck, aft. Milo is patching in from the utility junction below. You have 180 seconds from the moment he plugs in. Go." She melted back into the crowd. Rafe guided me toward a private elevator, the one marked Administration. A man in a suit cheaper than Rafe's, but trying too hard, stepped in front of us. "Sir, this area is restricted." "We're here for the Gulf Coast Health meeting," Rafe said, his voice bored. "Mrs. Bellamont has some quarterly papers to sign." The man's eyes flicked to me, then to the heavy gold ring on Rafe's hand, then back to his face. "Of course. Mr. Bellamont, this way." He led us down a hushed, gray corridor that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and stale cigarettes. The mobile processing office was just a glorified conference room, buzzing with the hum of oversized servers. A nervous-looking woman sat at a desk, and a younger man stood by the servers, his arms crossed. He wore a crisp white shirt, and on his lapel, shining under the fluorescent lights, was the hollow sun pin. "Mrs. Bellamont," the woman at the desk asked, her voice high. "We've been expecting you." "Milo, we're in," Rafe murmured, so low I barely heard him. "Copy. We are hot, 180 seconds starting now." The woman pushed a tablet and a stylus toward me. if you'll just sign off on the Q4 verifications." I didn't take it. I looked past her, at the young man with the pin. "Before I sign, I have a few questions about the new intake protocols." The young man stepped forward, his smile thin and practiced. "I can answer any questions, ma'am." "Good." I crossed my arms, tapping my fingers, channeling every impatient doctor I'd ever worked for. "Your new system is flagging code 201.5 ambulatory assistance for patients who are clearly coded as non-ambulatory. That's not just an error, it's a structural contradiction. It implies a service was rendered that couldn't have been. Who designed this database?" The man's smile faltered. He clearly expected a compliant, nervous temp, not an auditor. "It's a new efficiency metric. Ma'am, you're just risking a federal clawback." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "If your inputs are illogical, your outputs are fraudulent. Now, are you logging nursing hours by visit or by procedure? Because your billing codes for Program Jasper are completely out of alignment with standard Medicare reimbursement schedules. You're billing for 24-hour skilled care on patients who are only approved for 6. He was back on his heels, his face paling. He never had to actually defend the fraud, just process it. Program Jasper is a pilot program. "It's a compliance nightmare," I snapped. 100 seconds, a Milo whispered in my ear. The man with the pin narrowed his eyes. "You seem to know a lot about our internal procedures for just a home health aide." The threat was there, hanging in the sterile air. "We know who you are." "She's my wife." Rafe's voice cut in, cold as a knife. He hadn't moved from the doorway, but his presence filled the room. "And she's the one who taught me that efficiency is just a polite word for cutting corners. Now, answer her question, or we'll be discussing this with your superiors." As Rafe spoke, 2 uniformed casino security guards walked past the open doorway. Their steps were heavy. Rafe moved, just slightly, positioning himself between me and the hallway. As he shifted, his hand brushed mine. It was a fleeting, accidental touch, but his skin was warm, his grip solid and impossibly steady. It wasn't a caress, it was an anchor. It said, "I am here." And just as my pulse steadied, the blood in my veins turned to ice. "Rafe, what a delightful surprise. Bringing your wife to a place like this, I'm shocked." Silas Kincaid. He was standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 men in suits that were even more expensive than Rafe's. They looked like lawyers, but their eyes were empty. Silas was smiling, that same cold, analytical smirk I'd seen at the wedding. He held a tablet of his own. "An internal audit," Silas said, breezing into the room. "We at Helios believe in total transparency, don't we, Stephen?" The young man with the pin looked like he was going to be sick. "Yes, Mr. Kincaid." 73%. Milo's voice was tight in my ear. "They're here. They're on the network. I'm being firewalled. Need 40 seconds. Keep them talking." "Auditing your own books, Silas," Rafe said. His voice relaxed, almost conversational. He hadn't tensed. He'd just settled. "That's bold. It's like letting the tide guard the shore. Eventually, you wash away your own foundations." Silas laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "We prefer to think of it as managing the water level. You, of all people, should understand that. You can't just anchor your ships in any old harbor." His eyes slid to me. "Some ports are too shallow." "And some," Rafe countered, his gaze never leaving Silas's, "are just too busy pretending to be deep water, when really they're just a sandbar waiting to trap the unwary. You know, Silas, the thing about the tide, it always turns." 20 seconds. My heart was in my throat. I couldn't breathe. Silas was baiting Rafe, and Rafe was stalling. But they were running out of time. I looked away from the men, my eyes darting around the room, desperate. My gaze landed on a simple, gray cardboard file box on a metal shelf behind the desk. It was identical to a dozen others, but this one had a label, handwritten in black marker. "Program Jasper, inactive archived." And on the edge of the box, a single file tab was sticking up. It was upside down, but I could read the name, printed in block letters. Morin, Jonah? My son. The air left my lungs in a single, silent punch. It wasn't just a program. It wasn't just other children. They were using my son's name, my 5-year-old boy, a ghost patient, a number on a ledger to steal money. My vision tunneled, the room went silent. The only sound was the roar of blood in my ears. I felt a cold, clean rage I had never experienced. It burned away the fear, burned away the shock. 100% we have it, Anwen. Now. The wail of a fire alarm was so sudden and so loud it made me jump. A high-pitched whoop, whoop, whoop filled the corridor. Red lights began to flash, sweeping the room. "What is this?" Silas snapped, his composure finally breaking. "Localized alert," and one of his men said, checking his phone. "Third deck, aft, this section." "Anwen?" "We're leaving," Rafe said. He didn't ask. His hand clamped around my arm, and he pulled me out of the room, past a suddenly panicked Silas, past the guards who were now shouting into their radios. We weren't going toward the elevator. We were going the other way, toward a red exit sign that read, "Crew Access." He slammed the door open, and we were in a narrow metal staircase, the alarm bell even louder here. We pounded down the steps, me stumbling in my heels, Rafe holding me up, half dragging me. We burst out onto a low, wind-swept utility deck, just feet above the dark, slapping water. The air was cold, tasting of iron and river mud. Rook was there, waiting, not in the sedan, but at the helm of a long, black, knife-thin speedboat that was tied to a cleat. "Go!" Rafe yelled, shoving me toward the boat. I scrambled aboard, my hands shaking. Rafe was right behind me, untying the rope in a single, fluid motion and jumping in as Rook gunned the engine. The boat didn't pull away. It exploded forward, throwing me back into the leather seat. We hit the open water, and the wind was a physical blow, ripping the pins from my hair, lashing it across my face. I was shaking. I was vibrating, my teeth chattering, but not from the cold. It was rage, pure, undiluted fury. Morin, Jonah. The boat slammed hard against a wave, and I cried out. A second later, Rafe was beside me, his arm wrapping around my shoulders, pulling me against his side, anchoring me to the seat. He was a solid wall of warmth and muscle against the violent, cold night. "They used his name," I whispered, my voice torn away by the wind. "They put my son's name on a file." I looked up at him. His face was a mask of shadows and fury. His eyes fixed on the darkness ahead, his arm tightened around me, a grip of pure, possessive steel. "I know," he said, his voice a low growl that was more terrifying than the wind. "Whoever touched his name, Tessa, I will personally wipe their name, their family, and their entire history off the map." We didn't speak again until we were in a different part of the city, at a loading dock that looked abandoned. Rook tied off the boat, and Rafe led me into a massive, dark space that smelled of sawdust and old oil. Atelier 9. It was a cavernous warehouse, but in the back. A single light glowed over a high-tech workstation where Milo and Anwen were already waiting. "Show me," Rafe commanded. Milo typed, and a file tree appeared on a massive monitor. "It's all here. Rafe, they didn't even have time to wipe the cache." He clicked a file. "Program Jasper, it's bad. They're operating a network of phantom clinics, using lists of real, low-income children, flagging them as ghost patients in the system, and then billing federal insurance for millions in services that were never performed. It's grotesque." I just stared at the screen, at the rows of names, at the stolen dollars. My son. "I'm blowing the whistle," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence of the warehouse. Rafe turned to me. "Tessa, think. The moment you go public, you're not just a witness, you're the target. Helios won't be the only one coming for you. Everyone they paid, every politician, every consultant who took a cut, they'll all want to put you in the ground to keep this quiet." "I don't care," I said, meeting his gaze. The fear was gone. "They put my son's name on that list. They're stealing from children. I'm not backing down." Rafe looked at me for a long, long time. The anger in his eyes faded, replaced by something I couldn't name. It was heavy and sharp, a mixture of raw pride and a deep, profound fear. "Onwin," he said, his voice rough. "Start the protocol. Full protection, her and the boy." "Rafe," Onwin said, her voice tight. She was looking at her own screen. "We have a problem, a big one." "What?" "The Delta Unified Financial Investigations Office, they just received an anonymous tip, complete with evidence." She turned the screen toward us. It was a fabricated bank statement. A tip that a low-country home health aide named Tessa Marin has been accessing patient files and selling the data to an unidentified third party. I stared at the screen. "That's impossible. They're framing me." "It was their backup plan," Rafe said, his voice flat and dead. "They were never going to let you walk away." The frame-up hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just trying to silence me. They were trying to replace my truth with their lie, painting me as the criminal. "They're good," Rafe said, his voice flat, his eyes fixed on the fabricated bank statement on Onwin's screen. "But they're messy. They're moving too fast." He looked at me, his face grim. "The hotel isn't secure. Not for this. You're not a guest anymore. You're a target." We didn't wait. Within 30 minutes, I was in the back of the Bentley, this time with a new, terrifying passenger, my son. Onwin had retrieved him and Zadie, a separate, silent team bringing them to a rendezvous point. Zadie's face was a mask of fear and 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. I just hugged her, promised I'd explain, and pulled Jonah into the car with me. "Where are we going, Mommy?" he whispered, his eyes wide as he took in the plush leather seats. "To a new safe house, baby," I murmured, my heart aching. Rafe drove us to a building in the Garden District, a place that didn't look like a fortress. It was old brick and ivy, called Bellamont Row, but the elevator required Rafe's thumbprint, and the doors opened directly into a sprawling apartment that felt less like a safe house and more like a home. There was an open kitchen stocked with food, towering bookshelves, and windows that overlooked a private, walled-in courtyard. And in the corner of the massive living room, a brand-new, unopened box of Legos sat on a small rug. I stared at it, my throat tightening. He had remembered. From our one conversation on the balcony, he had remembered my son liked to build. Jonah saw them and was instantly at home. Tearing into the box, I watched him, a fragile, temporary peace settling over me. "Mr. Rafe," Jonah asked, not looking up from a blue brick he was inspecting. "What's your job?" I froze. I turned to look at Rafe, who was standing by the window, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He didn't tense. He walked over and knelt, bringing himself down to Jonah's eye level. "I watch the docks. Jonah," he said, his voice quiet, "and I make sure people don't shove." Jonah nodded, accepting this logic completely. "Okay, can you help me build a boat garage?" Later that afternoon, the storm had passed. Leaving the city washed clean and smelling of wet jasmine, I found them, my 5-year-old boy and this city's most dangerous man, sitting on the floor, heads bent together in concentration. Rafe was showing Jonah how to fold a sheet of paper into a boat, his large, scarred hands surprisingly delicate, his brow furrowed in concentration. "No, you fold this flap in," Rafe was instructing, "so it cuts the water, see?" I stood in the doorway, my heart doing a slow, painful lurch. It was an image of domestic peace so potent it felt like a betrayal. I was watching a life I could never have, and God help me. My heart was drifting, floating right toward him like one of those little paper boats. The peace shattered when my phone rang, the name on the screen making my stomach clench. Caleb. I stepped into the kitchen, my hand shaking as I answered. "Caleb, is everything okay?" "Where are you?" "Tessa." His voice wasn't worried. It was sharp, accusatory. "I went by your apartment. It's empty. You pulled Jonah out of daycare. People are talking." "We're fine. We're visiting family." "Are you," he sneered, "or are you with him, that man from the wedding? I'm not stupid, Tessa. I know a bad situation when I see one. You pulled Jonah into whatever mess you've made. I swear to God, I will file for full custody. You won't even see him on weekends." The threat was so sudden, so vicious, it stole my breath. "You can't—" "Watch me. You're an unstable single mother with no job, shacking up with a known element. No judge will side with you." I hung up, my knees buckling. I leaned against the marble counter, my blood roaring. What did he want? Rafe was standing in the kitchen doorway. He hadn't been eavesdropping. He'd just been aware. "My ex-husband," I whispered, the shame and fear choking me. He threatened to take Jonah. He said he'd file for custody." Rafe's expression didn't change, but his eyes went flat and cold, like the river water at midnight. He took out his phone, dialed a number. "Elias Rafe, I have a new file for you. Caldera and Voss, probate division. I need a full protective order filed for Tessa Maureen and her son, Jonah Morin, and I want a deep dive on a Caleb Pryor. I want to know every late payment, every undeclared asset, every skeleton in his closet, and I want it by morning." "Yes, she's with me now." He hung up, and he looked at me. "The law office of Caldera and Voss is my mother's firm. They will handle him. He won't touch you, and he won't touch Jonah. That is handled." Just handled. A problem that had threatened to end my world, and he had dismissed it in 30 seconds. That evening, Anwen came by. "The data from the Eclipse Bell is clean," she said, setting her tablet on the table. "Milo found the root directory for Program Jasper. It's worse than we thought." She turned to me. "I've made contact with Leora Penn. She's an independent investigative journalist. She's the best. She's untraceable and she's hungry. She'll meet, but she wants you." I looked at the file. If I talk, they'll put his name out there. Jonah's name. "Penn is careful," Anwen said. "She'll protect the minors. But Tessa, this is the only way to fight the frame-up. They accused you of selling data. You respond by giving it all away, for free, to the press." I was torn. My instinct was to hide, to protect my son, but they had used him. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Jonah was in the guest room, fast asleep. The door cracked open. I found Rafe on the main balcony, staring out at the city lights. He was holding his phone, but the screen was dark. He was just holding it. "You're afraid," I said, stepping out into the cool night air. He flinched, just slightly. "I don't get afraid." "You do," I said, standing beside him. "You're afraid for me. And for him?" He was silent for a long time. "My mother," he said, his voice rough. Her dying words to me, she made me promise. "Keep your boundaries. Rafe, the business is the business. The heart is the heart. Don't mix them." She said, "If you ever break that boundary for someone, you either marry them or you let them go. There's no in between. Not in this life." My heart stopped. This was it. The precipice. He was telling me he had crossed a boundary. I looked at my hands. The heavy gold ring was gone, returned after the mission. My finger felt bare. "Rafe, I'm not ready to marry anyone. I'm still just trying to breathe." A heavy silence settled between us, thick as the storm front that had passed. He nodded. Once, his jaw tight. "I know. Get some sleep. Tessa, you have lawyers to see in the morning." The next day, Rook was driving me to the Caldera and Voss offices. Rafe had stayed behind. "It's better if I'm not there," he'd said. "This is your fight, your lawyers." We were halfway across the city when a gray sedan swerved in front of us. Blocking the road, another pulled up behind, boxing us in. My blood turned to ice. 3 men in identical gray suits got out. They didn't look like street thugs. They looked like federal agents. They walked to my window. Rook put the car in park, his hands visible on the wheel. "Ma'am," the lead agent said, tapping on the glass. I rolled it down, my hand shaking. "Tessa Maureen, we're with the National Maritime Integrity Commission. We have a federal summons for you. We need you to come with us, now." "A summons. I have a lawyer. I'm on my way to their office." "Your lawyer has been notified," the man said, his eyes cold. He held up a file with a gold seal. "This is a matter of national commerce. You will come with us." They were opening my door. I was trapped. "That's a very good fake." Rafe's voice. I gasped. Turning, a third car, the Bentley, had materialized, blocking the lead sedan. Rafe was standing on the sidewalk, looking calm, almost bored. "Excuse me," the lead agent snapped. "The summons," Rafe said, walking closer. "It's good. The weight of the paper is almost right, but the seal the Eagle's left wing is off by about 3 millimeters. It's the standard forgery. You're Helios." The men froze. Their federal demeanor vanished. "You're out of your jurisdiction, Bellamont," the lead man snarled. "And you're out of your league," Rafe said, his voice dropping. "You have 10 seconds to get in your cars and drive away." Or Onwin, who was in the building across the street with a high-powered lens, "will send a photo of all 3 of your faces and your license plates to every major news desk in this state. Your choice." The men looked at each other. They looked at Rafe, and they backed down. They scrambled into their cars and sped off. I was shaking so hard I couldn't breathe. They tried to take me. As the lead agent turned to get in his car, his jacket sleeve pulled up, on his wrist, a metal cufflink, a hollow sun. I was getting back in the car when my phone rang. Zadie. "Tessa. Oh my God, Tessa." She was crying, sobbing. "Zadie, what's wrong?" "Your apartment I went by to pick up your mail like you asked. The door was open." "Tessa, they destroyed it. They broke everything, the pictures. Jonah's his crib. They sliced it open. It's oh God, Tessa." The phone slipped from my hand. "They broke into my home. They destroyed my son's room." I was distantly aware of Rook getting back in the car, of us driving back to Bellamont Row. I stumbled out of the elevator. Rafe was there, with Jonah. He saw my face and knew. He took Jonah into his arms, murmuring something, and handed him to Onwin. "Take him to the playroom. Do not leave him." Then he turned to me. I was vibrating, the terror of the abduction attempt completely eclipsed by this new, burning violation. "They used his name," I whispered, the words shaking. "They put him on a list. They tried to frame me. They tried to take me. And now they went into my home. They cut up his crib." I finally broke. A raw, ragged sob tore out of me, a sound of such pure rage it barely sounded human. "They broke into my home." Rafe caught me as my legs gave out. He didn't just hold me, he engulfed me. His arms a steel cage, holding me together as I fell apart. He let me shake, his hand buried in my hair, his body a solid, immovable wall. "Okay," he whispered, his voice a low, terrifying rumble against my ear. "Okay, that's it." He held me at arm's length, his gray eyes no longer cold, but burning like hot steel. "We've been defensive. We've been reacting. That ends now. They use the law to frame you, so we use the right law to bury them, with the right force." He pulled me to my feet. "Rook, get the car. We're not going to Caldera and Voss." "Where are we going?" I scrubbed the tears from my face, the rage hardening into a cold, sharp point. "We're going to see a friend," he said. "He's the man my mother trusted to draw the lines." He took me to an old, ivy-covered house in the Algiers Point, the home of Judge Armand Ciel, retired. He was an old man with eyes that had seen everything. Rafe introduced me. "Judge Ciel," Rafe said. "This is Tessa Moran. They've put her in the crosshairs. They used her son." The judge looked at me, his gaze piercing. Rafe's mother was a good woman. She knew where to draw a line in the sand. These Helios people, they don't see lines. They just see money. He gestured to his desk. "Tell me the truth, girl. Tell me everything. And we will draw a new line, not in sand, but in ink. We will bring this to justice." I sat, and for 2 hours, I told him everything, the files, the tattoo, the eclipse bell, Program Jasper, my son's name. When I was done, he nodded slowly. He printed a single document, an affidavit. "This," he said, "will make you an official witness. This will give us the power to move. But sign it, and there is no going back. Your life changes today." I picked up the pen. I looked at Rafe, who stood by the fireplace, watching me, his face grim but proud. I thought of Jonah's crib, sliced open. I thought of his name on that list. I signed it. My hand didn't even shake. Tessa Moran. I knew, In that second, my old life was gone forever. We left the judge's house as the sun was setting. When we got back to Bellamont Row, Anwen was waiting, her face pale. "It's out," she said. What's out?" Rafe asked. She turned her tablet toward me. It was the website for the New Orleans Chronicle, and there, on the front page, was my driver's license photo, the one Helios must have had on file. The headline was "Stark Single Mom Accuses Helios in Massive Child Patient Fraud Scheme." My life hadn't just changed. It had just been detonated. The adrenaline from Judge Seal's office, the vibrating, hollow shock of seeing my own face on that news alert had finally burned itself out. It left me exhausted, cold, and wide awake. It must have been 3 a.m. The apartment was tomb silent, the only sound the faint, electric hum of the city far below. The storm had broken, and a sharp, cool front had swept in, dropping the temperature. I heard a small sound from the guest room, a dry, rasping cough. "Jonah!" I pushed off the sofa, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. He was tangled in his blankets, his face flushed with sleep, but his breathing was rough. The stress, the change in the air, the new apartment. I laid my hand on his forehead, warm, but not feverish. I tucked the blanket back around his shoulders, my heart squeezing with a familiar, aching guilt. I had dragged him into this. I must have made a sound, a sigh that was closer to a sob, because when I turned, Rafe was standing in the hallway. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't the man in the armor-plated suit. He was in a pair of dark gray sweatpants and a plain t-shirt, his feet bare, his hair a mess. He looked human. "He's coughing," I whispered, my voice thick. "I heard," he said. He didn't come into the room. He just nodded toward the kitchen. "I'll make some tea. Ginger and honey, my mother used to say it could cure anything." I followed him out, pulling a throw blanket tighter around my shoulders. I sat on the sofa while he moved around the kitchen, the sounds of a cabinet opening, water running, the sharp click of the stove. He came back with 2 steaming mugs, the scent of sharp ginger and sweet honey filling the air. He didn't sit next to me. He surprised me by sinking down onto the plush rug at my feet, leaning his back against the sofa. His presence, a solid, warm weight. We drank in the silence, the warmth of the mug seeping into my frozen hands. "I'm so scared, Rafe," I finally whispered to the dark. "I signed the paper, I did the thing, and now my face is everywhere. I've got nothing left to lose, which means I've lost. I'm back at the starting line. No, I'm behind it. I'm a target. My son is a target, and I'm just so tired of being brave." He was quiet for a long time, staring into his mug. "You're not at the starting line," he said, his voice a low, rough rumble. "You have the data, and you have me." He took a breath. "You know what I'm afraid of." I looked down at the top of his head. I thought you didn't get afraid." "I'm terrified," he admitted, the words so raw they seemed to be pulled from his chest. "Of him, my father. He wasn't like my mother. He didn't use ledgers. He used force. He used his fists and his rage to solve every problem. He enjoyed the conflict." He looked up, turning his head to meet my gaze. His gray eyes were dark with a history I couldn't imagine. "When I was on that boat, and Silas was threatening you when you told me what they did to Jonah's room, all I could think about was what my father would have done. I wanted to tear them apart. I wanted to find Silas Kincaid and make him pay, in a way the law never could. That's what scares me, that I'm just him, in a better suit, that I'll let that rage, and not my reason, protect you." The confession hung in the air, a fragile, heavy thing. He had just handed me his deepest fear. I found myself kneeling on the sofa, leaning toward him, without thinking. My hand trembling, I reached out. He didn't move. He watched me, his eyes tracking my fingers as I gently, tentatively, touched the thin white scar on his cheekbone. It was smooth, old. "What did you survive?" I whispered. His eyes closed, just for a second, and he leaned into my touch, a movement so slight I almost missed it. "A lesson," he breathed. "I was 17. I hesitated on an order. He taught me that hesitation is weakness. He opened his eyes, and they were burning. He was wrong. It was humanity. He covered my hand with his palm warm and calloused, holding my fingers against his face. He taught me the wrong thing. The real lesson was never let anyone else decide what's in your heart. The space between us, which had been miles wide, suddenly became non-existent. I didn't know who moved first. It was a slow, agonizing drift, a question asked in 1,000 tiny movements. His eyes searched mine, and my breath caught. His lips brushed mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was the promise of one. It was hesitant, questioning, and so impossibly gentle it made my heart ache. It was nothing like the single-mindedness of his Mafia Boss persona. This was Rafe, just Rafe, and he tasted like ginger and the storm that had just passed. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against mine. His breathing was unsteady. "Tessa," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. "You have to tell me to stop, because if you don't..." I thought of Caleb, who had only ever taken... I thought of 6 years of being poor Tessa, the charity case, the single mom. I thought of this man who had feared his own darkness, who had bought my son Legos, who had put his entire operation on the line to shield me. I met his gaze, my heart hammering against my ribs, a wild, frantic drum. "I want this," I whispered, and the words were the truest I had ever spoken. "I want you." He stood then, pulling me to my feet with an effortless strength. He didn't pull me toward the bedroom. He just led me to the center of the living room, where a single, warm, yellow lamp cast a pool of golden light. He put his hands on my waist, just as he had at the wedding, and just held me. We stood there, breathing each other in. It was like the first dance, but this time, there was no lie. This time, our hearts were pounding in the same frantic rhythm. My hands were shaking, from the cold, from the fear, from a deep, profound desire I had locked away for years. I lifted them, not to his shoulders, but to the collar of his t-shirt. My fingers fumbled with the fabric. He just watched me, his eyes dark, letting me lead. He was wearing his suit jacket from earlier, which he'd left on the back of the chair. He shrugged it off, but instead of tossing it aside, he opened it and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled overwhelmingly of hymn's cedar and that clean, sharp scent of rainwater. It enveloped me like a shield. "Tessa," he murmured, his lips brushing the sensitive skin just behind my ear. The single word, spoken in that low, rough voice, sent a shiver straight down my spine, making my knees buckle. His hands slid from my waist up my back, his palms warm through my thin shirt, pulling me flush against him. It was a perfect fit. My body arched into his, a reflex I hadn't known I possessed. My own hands, suddenly brave, tangled in the thick, dark hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. My lips found his jaw, the faint stubble scratching my skin, before finding his mouth again. This kiss was different. It was a claiming. It was a drowning. We stumbled, a tangle of limbs, sinking back onto the deep cushions of the sofa. He took the weight, bracing himself on his elbows, his body a heavy, warm blanket over mine. He broke the kiss, but only to look at me. His eyes locked on mine, still asking, still making sure I was with him. I saw the vulnerability there, the desire warring with that profound fear of his own power. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I nodded, my eyes filling with tears. I reached up, my fingers tracing his scar again, and pulled him down. The world dissolved. There was no sound but our breathing, ragged and uneven. There were no flashing lights or casino alarms, just the warm yellow light and the steady, solid weight of him. He whispered my name, and it sounded like a prayer. I answered with my voice thick. It was a slow, desperate rediscovery. My fingers clutched his shoulders. I felt the fine sheen of perspiration on his temples, the frantic pulse in his throat, the way his heart hammered against my own. It wasn't a fire. It was a deep, flowing lava, a wave of warmth and connection so profound it remade me from the inside out. The release came like a slow, cresting wave that washed away all the fear, all the cold, all the years of being alone. It left me breathless, my body humming, and a sound I hadn't heard in years bubbled up from my chest, a soft, breathless laugh, a laugh of pure, unadulterated happiness. Rafe collapsed beside me, not moving away, but pulling me into the curve of his body, tucking my head under his chin. He was trembling. He kissed my forehead, a long, lingering press of his lips that felt like a vow. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick and raw. "Thank you for trusting me." And then there was peace, a quiet so complete it felt sacred. We lay tangled together, his jacket still half draped over me, listening to the faint hum of the building. "My mother," he said, his voice soft in the darkness. "She made a seafood pasta from Corsica. It had so much garlic in it. She said it could cure the plague. And mussels, so many mussels." I smiled, my cheek against his chest. "Jonah wants to build a city," I whispered back. "A whole city. He said it needs a special garage for boats, and a tower so tall it can touch the moon." I tilted my head back to look at him. "Rafe, I have no idea what this is. I'm a mess. I'm broken, and I'm running for my life." "Tessa," he started, but I put a finger to his lips. "But I want to try this," I said, my voice steady. "For real. With you." His gray eyes, so dark in the dim light, held mine. "My mother's boundary," he said, his voice rough. "I crossed it the night I put my hand on your back at that wedding. I just didn't want to admit it." He brushed the tangled hair from my face. "You're not a client. You're not a liability. From this moment on, I protect you. You and Jonah, your family. That's it." I laid my head back on his chest, and for the first time in 6 years, I fell asleep without fear. I woke to a gasp. The first thin light of dawn was painting the room in shades of pink and gray. I was still on the sofa, tangled with Rafe, his jacket, our blanket. Jonah was standing in the archway, his hair sticking straight up, his stuffed bear clutched in one hand. He was staring, his 5-year-old mind trying to process the scene. "Mommy?" My heart leaped into my throat. I sat up, pulling the jacket around me like a robe. "Jonah, honey, But Rafe was already moving. He wasn't flustered or angry or embarrassed. He sat up, scrubbed a hand over his face, and swung his legs to the floor. He looked at Jonah, his expression sleepy and soft. "You're up early," Rafe said, his voice gravelly from sleep. "I was just about to make hot cocoa. You want to help?" Jonah's eyes went wide. "With marshmallows." "The big ones," Rafe confirmed. He stood, stretching, and offered his hand to my son. Jonah ran to him, grabbing his hand. I sat there, wrapped in the scent of cedar and the warmth of the man who had just remade my world, and watched them walk into the kitchen. I watched Rafe lift Jonah up to reach the mugs. Judge Seal was right. My old life was gone. I had just bet my entire future, and my son's, on the man making him hot chocolate, and I had never been more certain of anything in my life. The quiet, domestic peace of that morning, the smell of cocoa and the sound of Jonah's laughter, was the last breath before plunging underwater. The news story hitting the web wasn't the end of the fight. It was the signal for the war to begin. The first volley came from Helios's lawyers. They were slick, expensive, and fast. They filed an injunction to gag you. Elias, the head attorney from Caldera and Voss, told me over a conference call. I was sitting at Rafe's massive dining table, my coffee untouched. They're claiming your affidavit is unsubstantiated libel, designed to manipulate the market. My stomach turned to ice. Can they do that? Can they silence me? They can try, a new voice said. Judge Armand Ciel had joined the call, and I have already denied it, without prejudice. In fact, I'm accelerating the timeline. A preliminary public hearing is set in 3 days. Silas Kincaid didn't wait for the hearing. The next morning, the PR war began. My phone started vibrating so hard it nearly fell off the table. It was Zadie, and my mother, and a dozen numbers I didn't recognize. Zadie sent me a link. I clicked it. My blood ran cold. It was a grainy, black and white video, clearly from a hidden security camera, time-stamped 6 months prior. It showed me in a parking garage. A man I vaguely recognized as my old apartment manager was handing me a thick white envelope. I took it and put it in my bag. The headline, emblazoned across the bottom: "Exclusive whistleblower Tessa Morin filmed taking cash payoff." I couldn't speak. "Rafe, that was the cash deposit from my old parking space. The lease was private." "It doesn't matter," Rafe said. He was standing behind me, his hands on my shoulders, his voice a low, controlled rumble. "It's meant to muddy the water. It's meant to give them an angle." As if summoned by the chaos, Elias called back. His voice was grim. "Tessa, he did it. Caleb Pryor filed an emergency petition for full custody of Jonah." I think I stopped breathing. What grounds? "He's citing child endangerment," Elias said, his voice clipped with anger. "He's citing your unstable criminal lifestyle. And he submitted the doctored parking garage video as Exhibit A." I dropped the phone. The room tilted. He was using this lie to take my son. Rafe picked up the phone. "Elias, it's Rafe Bellamont. Execute the counterfile. The one we prepared. The Pearl Avenue accounts." He listened, his face hardening. "I don't care if it's scorched earth. He threatened her son. He fired the first shot. I want him buried by noon." He hung up and looked at me, his gray eyes steady. "My lawyers have definitive proof that Caleb embezzled nearly $40,000 from the Pearl Avenue Condo Association fund over the last 2 years. He's not getting within 100 feet of Jonah. That fire is now contained." He was fighting a war on 3 fronts. The 4th one walked in a moment later. "The NMIC," Anwen said, her voice tight. "The National Maritime Integrity Commission, the fake agents who ambushed you. Tessa." "What about them?" Rafe asked. "They're on the Helios payroll, have been for a year. I've got the offshore wire transfers. They've been using their federal credentials to systematically disrupt your competitors. Rafe, they weren't just after Tessa. They were using her as a way to get leverage on you." Rafe didn't hesitate. He was a general moving pieces on a board. "Then we cut off their authority. Anwen, set up an emergency meeting of the Crescent Private Port Council. Today, I'm invoking the Charter's non-interference clause. We are voiding the NMIC's oversight authority at every single Bellamont terminal, effective immediately. They want to use the law. We'll use the real law." Amid this storm of counterattacks, a single clear, true note. Leora Penn, the journalist, published her story. The headline was simple, stark, and powerful. "Program Jasper the children who weren't there." She laid out the entire grotesque scheme. She used the data from the Eclipse Bell. She quoted my affidavit. My name was there, but it was secondary to the facts, to the crime. And Jonah, I scrolled, my heart in my throat. His name wasn't there. He was just a protected minor whose name was exploited by the fund. I cried, for the first time. It wasn't from fear or rage, but from a profound, aching relief. She had protected him. "She wants an interview," Anwen said later that day, holding her tablet. "With you, Rafe. She's going after the whole network. She wants to talk to the shadow entrepreneur of New Orleans." Rafe, who had spent his entire life building walls and operating from the darkness, looked at me. He looked at the article, at the war Helios was waging against me. "Tell her yes," he said, "on one condition. The spotlight stays on Helios. I'm not the story. I'm just the man who helped the woman who is bringing them down." Helios's next move was brutal and simple. I was trying to do something normal, something human. I was trying to order groceries online to be delivered to Bellamont Row. I went to checkout, card declined. I tried again, declined. I logged into my bank account, my meager checking account, the one with my last paycheck from Low Country Care. The balance was 0. A bright red banner flashed across the top of the screen. "Account frozen pending fraud investigation, Interregional Community Health Fund." They had used their own frame-up. They had cut off my money. I was Officially penniless, I had exactly $24.16 in my wallet. The humiliation was so complete, so suffocating, I couldn't even speak. I was the very thing I had dreaded, becoming a kept woman, entirely dependent on the man in whose house I was living. Rafe must have seen the look on my face. He didn't offer me cash, a gesture that would have felt like a transaction. He just held my gaze, his own full of a cold, controlled fury. The next day, Zadie called. She was breathless. "Tessa, what is going on? A trust fund was just opened, in my name, with you and Jonah as the sole beneficiaries. It's Tessa. There's a lot of money in it." I looked across the room at Rafe, and he was on his own phone, already fighting the next fire. He'd done it without a word. When I caught him later, I was speechless. "Rafe, I can't—" "If I give you money," he said, cutting me off, his voice quiet, "Silas will paint you as a mistress. The press will eat it alive. It invalidates your testimony." He stepped closer. "But if your best friend, a woman with a clean record and a steady job, manages a trust fund for your and your son's welfare, that's just smart. Protective planning. It's untouchable. It's yours. Tessa. No strings. Just a shield." I couldn't just hide behind his shields. I had to fight back myself. I'd been a ghost for too long. I contacted Leora Penn, who made a call. That night, I was standing at a podium at a special city council open forum on healthcare fraud. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the sides of the lectern. The room was packed, reporters, concerned citizens, and in the back row, a solid, immovable shadow. Rafe. Wasn't in a suit, just dark trousers and a dark shirt, but he might as well have been wearing armor. His eyes never left me. "My name is Tessa Morin," I started, my voice a pathetic, trembling whisper. I cleared my throat. I thought of Jonah's crib. I looked up. "My name is Tessa Morin, I said again, my voice clear and loud. It echoed in the hushed room. "I am a home health aide, and I am here to talk about the children who aren't on your rosters, but whose names are being used to steal millions of dollars from you, from me, and from the state." I spoke for 10 minutes. I told them everything. When I finished, the room was utterly, profoundly silent. And then, a single person in the back began to clap, then another. I looked at Rafe. His face was unreadable, but his gaze, it was a physical thing, a mixture of raw, burning pride and a terrifying, bone-deep worry. Silas tried a new tactic, the direct approach. I got a text from an unknown number. A truce. "Let's talk. Just you and me. No one else." "Absolutely not," Rafe said. "Yes," I said, "but on my terms." I met him at a crowded outdoor cafe in the French Quarter. In broad daylight, Anwen, wearing sunglasses and reading a newspaper, was 2 tables over. I sat down and placed my phone on the table between us. The recording app was already running. "You're an impressive woman, Tessa," Silas said, stirring an espresso. He looked relaxed. "You've caused a significant amount of trouble." He slid a glossy pamphlet across the table. It was for a prestigious Ivy League university. "The Jonah Morin Scholarship Fund," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "A full ride, undergrad, graduate school, any degree he wants. We'll set it up tomorrow. All you have to do is retract your affidavit. Say you were confused. Say Bellamont pressured you." I looked at the picture of the ivy-covered library. I thought of my son's name on that ghost file. I slid my phone an inch closer to him. "Is this offer in writing, Mr. Kincaid?" I asked, my voice as calm as his. "Or is bribing a federal witness something you only do verbally?" His smile vanished. I stood up, leaving the pamphlet on the table. My son isn't for sale. The danger was no longer just legal. A few days later, I was walking, trying to clear my head. A man was following me. He'd been behind me for 3 blocks, his pace matching mine. I turned a corner, my heart hammering. He turned. I ducked into a narrow, wrought iron alley, pressing my back to the brick. The man appeared at the entrance, a shadow blocking the light. He took a step, and then he just crumpled, like a puppet with its strings cut. Anwen stepped out of the shadows behind him, as silent as the humid air. She hadn't made a sound. She didn't even look at me. She just stooped, tucked a small, folded piece of paper into his breast pocket, and walked away. My legs were shaking, but I waited a full minute. I crept forward and looked at the paper. It was a simple typed sentence. No one touches Bellamont's people. Rafe was keeping his promise to me and to himself. He was fighting his father's nature. Helios runs on data, he explained that night in the warehouse to me, Onwen, and Milo. Their data centers need a constant supply of high-grade silicon for their processors. That supply comes from exactly 3 companies. All 3 use Bellamont Logistics for their import-export. He pointed to a shipping lane on a massive digital map. As of this morning, we're cutting their oxygen. We are rerouting all silicon shipments to, let's call it, long-term storage inspection in a Singapore depot. Their entire system, their fraud, their platform, it will all grind to a halt in less than a week. The market felt it. Helios stock plummeted. They announced a supply chain bridge collapse with Bellamont. The news called it a war between the port and the tech sector. Rafe just watched the ticker, his face calm. It's time to unmask them, he said. And the tide turned. The frame-up, the one that had frozen my account, had finally backfired. The Delta Unified Financial Investigations Office, the real feds, the ones Helios had tried to use, had seen Leora's article. They'd seen the data. They realized their own agency's name had been used in a massive criminal conspiracy. They were furious. Judge Seal called me. Tessa, the DUFI wants to cooperate. They want to lead a real raid. They've already got the warrant. They want to go back to the Eclipse Bell, and they need you to lead them to the data. We were winning. I let myself feel it. Just for a second, we were actually winning. I was sitting on the sofa at Bellamont Row, Rafe beside me, Onwen across from us, planning the raid. And then Rafe's personal phone chimed, a sound I had never heard before. Not a call, a text. He looked at it. His entire body went absolutely rigid, the color drained from his face, leaving only the white, angry scar. He looked terrifying. "Rafe," I whispered, "what is it?" He didn't speak. He just slowly turned the phone so I could see the screen. It was a picture. Jonah. He was at a playground, one I didn't recognize. He was high on a yellow slide, his head thrown back, laughing at the person holding the camera. He looked happy. He looked beautiful. He was alive. The photo was taken from close, too close. Beneath it, a single line of text from Silas Kincaid. "Such a beautiful boy. Don't go to court." The world tilted. The air in my lungs turned to poison. I couldn't breathe. I felt a hand, not on me, but taking me. Rafe's hand shot out, his fingers finding mine, gripping them so hard I thought my bones would break. I looked at his face. His eyes were no longer gray. They were black. A storm of pure, unadulterated rage, the very thing he'd feared his entire life. He was vibrating with it. He looked from the pictured in to me. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his chest rising and falling. "We don't blink," he said, his voice a low, lethal promise. "We don't flinch. We go." The morning of the hearing was cold and sharp, the sky a bruised, metallic gray. The picture of Jonah on that slide, laughing, vulnerable, targeted, had burned itself behind my eyelids. I hadn't slept. I just sat in the dark, my rage a cold, hard stone in my stomach, while Rafe and Onwen orchestrated the counter-move. "The plan changes," Onwen said, her voice clipped. "All business." We were in the underground garage, the air smelling of concrete and exhaust. The original safe house is blown. Zadie and Jonah are being moved. Now, Rook, you're on diversion. I'm taking them to Montclair Haven. My head snapped up. Montclair Haven was a fortress disguised as a school, a place for the children of billionaires and diplomats, with security that rivaled a bank vault. "He'll be safe there, Tessa," Rafe said, his hand on my arm. His touch was steady, but I could feel the coiled, violent energy just beneath his skin. "No one gets in, no one. You and I go to court, we end this." Jonah was safe. I had to believe that. I kissed him goodbye. his skin warm and smelling of sleep, and watched Onwin's reinforced SUV disappear into the pre-dawn traffic. Rook drove our Bentley. Rafe sat beside me in the back, silent, his jaw set, his gray eyes fixed on the city passing by. The threat against Jonah had pushed him to a new, terrifying edge. He was no longer the man fearing his father's rage. He was the man harnessing it. We were ascending the ramp to the Chanterelle Bridge, the wide expanse of the Mississippi churning below, when it happened. A large 18-wheel flatbed truck, 2 cars ahead, suddenly jackknifed. It was a sickening orchestrated slide of metal, blocking all 3 lanes of traffic. The truck's cargo massive, unsecured steel culverts broke free, rolling and crashing across the asphalt, creating an impenetrable wall of metal. A dark, viscous liquid oil began to pour from a ruptured tank, spreading across the concrete. It was an ambush, designed to stop us, to make us miss the hearing. "Rook," Rafe said, his voice lethally calm. "I see it, boss." Rook didn't slam the brakes. He decelerated smoothly, his eyes on the rearview mirror. A black panel van was coming up fast behind us, ready to box us in. "The emergency lane," Rafe commanded. Rook wrenched the wheel. The Bentley jumped the curb, its heavy-duty suspension groaning as we slammed onto the narrow concrete shoulder. We were flying past the gridlocked traffic, but the flatbed had blocked the lane's exit. The cab of the truck angled perfectly to cut off escape. "They're not just stopping us," I whispered, my heart hammering. "They're trapping us." "Rook, hold," Rafe said. He was looking at the panel van, now stuck behind the traffic, its doors opening. Men were getting out. "Onwin," Rafe said, not into a phone, but to the car. "Now." From somewhere behind us, a high-pitched, electronic shriek filled the air, so high it was almost painful. The men getting out of the van stopped, clutching their heads, their earpieces suddenly useless. A small, black drone, no bigger than a dinner plate, rose from behind us Onwin's chase car, stuck 200 yards back and shot toward the flatbed. It wasn't a weapon, it was a tool. It hovered near the truck's cab and emitted a focused, electromagnetic pulse. Sparks erupted from the truck's engine block, a small plume of white smoke. The truck's electronics were fried. "Go!" Rafe yelled. Rook stomped on the accelerator. We weren't going around. We were going through. The Bentley's reinforced grille hit the small gap between the flatbed and the concrete barrier. It was a gap of inches. Metal screamed. The sound was deafening. My world was a violent, lurching, scraping noise. I was shaking, my breath trapped in my chest. I couldn't scream. I could only hear the sound of my own panic. "Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. My own voice, the technique I used for my elderly patients, the ones with panic attacks. "What?" Rafe's head snapped toward me. "Breathe," I gasped, the word torn from my throat. "Do it with me. In 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I saw him do it. His jaw was clenched, his eyes locked on the chaos, but his chest rose and fell with my count. He reached over, his hand not finding mine, but finding the auxiliary steering wheel on the passenger side panel. His grip was white-knuckled. We were in sync, our breathing, our terror. We burst through. The car, scarred and screeching, found open road on the downside of the bridge. Rook didn't slow. We arrived at the courthouse 3 minutes late. We half ran, half walked down the marble corridor, a small army of lawyers meeting us at the door. And there he was, Silas Kincaid, standing by the courtroom entrance, sipping a coffee, looking completely relaxed. He saw the scrape of pain on Rafe's shoulder, the terror in my eyes, and he smirked. "Cutting it a little close. Rafe," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Bad traffic." Rafe didn't even look at him. He just pushed the courtroom doors open and guided me inside. The room was packed. It was silent. Judge Seal looked down at me from the bench, his expression severe. "Mrs. Morin, you're late." "I apologize. Your Honor, I was detained." "So, I've been informed. Please take the stand." My legs felt like water. I sat, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. The lead Helios attorney, a silver-haired man with a shark smile, stood up, but Judge Seal held up a hand. "This is a preliminary hearing. Counsel, I am not hearing arguments. I am hearing testimony. Mrs. Morin, you submitted an affidavit alleging massive systemic fraud on the part of the Helios Syndicate, specifically concerning a program Jasper. In your own words, please tell this court what you found." I looked at the packed room. I saw Leora Penn in the front row, her pen poised. I saw Rafe, standing against the back wall, his arms crossed, a silent, immovable guardian. I took a breath, in for 4, hold for 4. "Program Jasper," I said, my voice clear, echoing in the vast room, "is a lie. It's a ghost. I was a home health aide for Low Country Care, which was acquired by Helios. I was asked to sign off on files for services that were never performed, on children who were never seen." "Objection," the Helios lawyer shouted. "Speculation, the witness has no proof." "I have proof," I said, turning to the judge. "I brought it." I laid out the files Onwin had printed. "This is a signature log. It lists a nurse Amelia Vance as performing 24-hour skilled care on 12 different children. Simultaneously, in 3 different counties, Nurse Vance does not exist." A murmur went through the room. "This," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "is a list of the children in the program, 142 names, all of them flagged as high needs, all of them billing the maximum to federal insurance, and this," I held up the final sheet, my hand steady, "is the file for a ghost patient, a child who was never sick, never treated, never even a patient. His name was just taken, stolen, and used to bill for over $50,000 in phantom procedures." "Her own son," someone whispered from the gallery. "Objection. The witness is emotional. This is a fabrication," the lawyer roared. "It is noted for the record. Counsel," Judge Seal said, his voice a hammer, "you will sit down." I had done it. It was out. The truth was out. Rafe's phone vibrated. He was in the hallway just outside the main doors, his body rigid. Onwin was beside him, her face pale, her phone to her ear. I'd stepped out for a glass of water, the proceedings on a 5-minute recess. "What is it?" I whispered, my blood running cold. "There's a team," Onwin said, her voice tight, all professionalism. "They're at Montclair Haven. They're trying to breach the south perimeter. It's a full-on assault." My world, which had just solidified, shattered. "Jonah." Rafe's face was a mask of pure, cold fury. He looked at Onwin. He looked at Rook, who was already running down the hall. He looked at the courtroom doors, where my testimony was just beginning. "Rook, you're with Onwin," he commanded. "Go, now, lock that school down. No one gets in. No one. Do you understand me?" "Rafe," Onwin said, her eyes wide. "They're asking for you. It's your authorization." "No." His voice was flat, final. "I stay with her. If I leave, they win. They pull me from this. They get the hearing postponed. They get her alone. You handle the school." He was choosing me. He was choosing the public fight over the private one, trusting his team, trusting Onwin, with his son's life, my son's life. Onwin and Rook sprinted down the hall. Rafe pushed me back toward the courtroom. "Rafe, no." I tried to pull away. "Jonah, you have to go." "He's safe. Tessa," he said, his hands gripping my shoulders. "She will hold the line. We will hold this one." Before we could re-enter, Silas Kincaid stepped out of the men's room, blocking our path. He was still smiling. "This is all so dramatic," he said, adjusting his tie. He stepped close to me, his voice a low, poisonous whisper. "But it can all stop. Right now. You walk in there. You retract your statement, say you were coerced, a single signature." He paused, his cold eyes boring into mine. "And Jonah will be perfectly safe. I'll even let him keep the scholarship." My hand instinctively went to my mouth. "You touch his name again," Rafe's voice cut in, a low, lethal growl. He stepped between us, his body a solid wall, shielding me. He was so close to Silas they were almost touching. "You even think his name." and I will personally drag you to the silt of the Mississippi River, and I will bury you in it. This isn't business. This isn't a game. This is a promise." Silas's smile didn't waver. Brave words. "But you're not at the school, are you? You're here, with her." My phone chimed, a text from Anwen. "Secure, 2 in custody, local PD on site. No breach. No one touched him. Jonah is fine." A sob, a raw, strangled gasp of relief, tore out of my throat. The tears I had been holding back for days, for weeks, finally came. I sagged against the wall, my legs giving out. Rafe was there in an instant, his arm around my waist, holding me up. He looked at Silas over my shoulder, his eyes blazing with a cold, triumphant fire. We walked back into the courtroom. "The defense," the Helios lawyer said, his smile back, "would like to call a rebuttal witness, or rather, present new evidence, evidence that this entire performance is a lie." He gestured, and a massive screen lowered. "Roll the footage. This is from 6 months ago. This is your witness, Tessa Morin, taking a cash bribe in a parking garage." The grainy, black and white footage I'd seen played on the screen. Me, the envelope. The murmur in the courtroom was instant. I saw the doubt on their faces. "As you can see," the lawyer began. "Permission to approach. Your Honor," a new voice called out. "Leora Penn." She was standing, holding a laptop. "This is not," the lawyer stammered. "Miss Penn, this is highly irregular," Judge Seal said. "It is, Your Honor," Leora said, her voice ringing with clarity. "But defense counsel has just presented manipulated evidence to this court. I have the full, unedited video from the same camera provided by the parking garage owner, who, it turns out, is also being extorted by Helios." "Show it," Judge Seal commanded. Leora plugged her laptop in. The same scene played, but this time, it kept going. It showed me counting the money, pulling out a signed lease agreement and handing the manager a receipt. The audio, cleaned up, was clear. "And that's $1,200 for the deposit and first month's parking," the manager said. "Thanks, Dawn. You know how hard it is to get a spot this close," my own voice replied. A collective gasp went through the room. It wasn't a bribe, it was rent. The Helios lawyer was ashen. Judge Seal's face was thunder. He brought his gavel down with a crash that shook the room. "I have seen enough. Based on the testimony of Mrs. Morin, the clear evidence of perjury, and this circus of intimidation, I am signing the warrants, effective immediately, for the offices of the Helios Syndicate and a full forensic sweep of the Eclipse Bell Casino. The Delta Unified Financial Team will execute now." Chaos, shouting, reporters running for the doors. Silas Kincaid hadn't moved. He just stood there, watching me, his smile still intact. He caught my eye as federal marshals entered the room. "You think justice will be fast enough?" "Tessa," he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. Rafe stepped in front of me, his gaze locked on Silas. "When the tide comes in," Rafe said, his voice quiet, "all the trash that's been hidden gets exposed, and the tide is here. Silas." Anwen's phone buzzed. She held it up. It was a live feed from a local news helicopter. It was focused on the Eclipse Bell. Teams of agents in windbreakers labeled Doofy were swarming the gangplank. A marshal stepped up to Silas, but before he could speak, one of Silas's expensive lawyers stepped in, holding up a document, a temporary, pre-filed injunction, a legal privilege. "Mister, Kincaid will cooperate fully," the lawyer said smoothly, "at his leisure." Silas adjusted his cuffs. He looked at me, and then at Rafe, and with the marshals watching, powerless, he simply walked out of the courtroom. They had his managers, they had his boat, but the head of the snake was still free. The knot was still tied. The courtroom doors burst open and the world came rushing in. It wasn't a sound, it was a physical blow, the roar of 100 voices shouting my name. The blinding, rhythmic pop, pop, pop of flash photography, microphones, cell phones, and staring eyes were everywhere. A wall of desperate, hungry faces. Mrs. Morin, Mrs. Morin, is it true about your son? Are you Bellamont's mistress? How much is he paying you? I froze. The adrenaline that had carried me through the testimony, the ambush on the bridge, the threat against Jonah, it was all gone. It had drained out of me the second Silas Kincaid walked free, leaving me empty, hollow and shaking. I had nothing left. I couldn't move. A solid, immovable wall of heat pressed against my back. "Rook," Rafe's voice commanded, a low rumble that cut through the chaos. "Sublevel, now." He didn't push through the crowd, he parted it. His hand was a vice on my lower back, propelling me forward. He was a shield, a human bulwark, absorbing the shouts and the flashes. Rook had a service elevator waiting. The doors slid shut, and the world went silent. The silence was so profound, so sudden. It was louder than the noise. It was just the low, electric hum of the elevator descending. I leaned my head against the cold steel wall, my legs finally giving out. I didn't fall. Rafe caught me, in one fluid motion. He pulled me away from the wall and into his chest. It wasn't like the night on the sofa. This wasn't passion. It was ballast. It was an anchor. He just held me, his arms wrapped around me, one hand coming up to cradle the back of my head, pressing my face into the wool of his suit. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, solid as the earth, and let me shake. I felt the first real sob, the one I'd been choking back for days, tear out of me. He absorbed that, too. He just held me tighter until the elevator doors opened into the tomb-like silence of the underground garage. The apartment at Bellamont Row was quiet. Anwen had brought Jonah back an hour ago. When I walked through the door, my shoes in my hand, my hair a wreck, he ran to me. He didn't cry. He launched himself at me, his skinny arms wrapping around my neck so tight I could barely breathe. I buried my face in his hair, which still smelled like his pillow, and just inhaled. "I'm okay, Mommy," he whispered, his voice serious. "I was so scared, baby," I whispered back, my voice breaking. "I know." He pulled back, his face solemn, a little man. But I wasn't, not really. Uncle Rafe told me that if I got scared, I just had to start counting. Really slow, all the way to 100. And he promised that by the time I got to 100, Anwen would be finished and the scary men would be gone. My heart, which I thought had shattered, just melted. I looked over his head at Rafe, who was leaning against the doorframe, watching us. "I only got to 92, Jonah finished, his voice full of pride. I couldn't speak. I just held my son, my gaze locked with Rafe's. He had done more than protect my son's body. He had protected his mind. He had given him a tool. He had parented. That night, sleep was impossible. The city felt too quiet, the wind too hollow. Silas was still out there. I found Rafe on the main balcony, where I'd found him once before. The air was cool and still. It was just as he'd been that night at the L'Argent, standing in the dark, staring at the lights. He was holding his phone, the screen dark. I came up behind him, not making a sound. This time, I didn't hesitate. I wrapped my arms around his waist from behind, pressing my cheek against the solid, warm muscle of his back. He didn't startle. He just covered my hands with his. "Calling her again," I murmured. I felt him take a deep breath. It's a stupid habit. I do it when the stakes are highest, when I'm not sure what she would have done. He turned in my arms, his gaze finding mine in the shadows. "And they've never been higher. Tessa." He looked exhausted. The armor was gone. "I wanted to kill him today," he said, his voice a low, rough admission. "When he sent that picture, when he stood in that hallway and tried to bargain for your son's safety, that was my father, boiling up inside me, and I wanted to let him out. I wanted to end it." "But you didn't," I whispered, my hands sliding up to frame his face. "You didn't. Rafe, you stayed with me. You chose the law." "He's still out there," he said, his voice grim, his hands finding my waist. "That legal privilege is temporary, but he's a snake. He'll find another hole. He'll keep coming for you. He'll keep coming for Jonah. He'll use Caleb. He'll use the press. He'll never stop. He pulled me closer, his eyes burning with a new, desperate intensity. I want to marry you. My heart stopped. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a move on a chessboard. Rafe, I tried to pull back, but he held me fast. What? No, we can't, that's insane. It's not, he said, his voice raw. It's not about a wedding. It's not about a party. It's about protection. The second you file that paper, the second you are legally my wife, my name becomes a fortress. My mother's firms, my family's trusts, they all become your shield. Silas can't touch you. Caleb can't touch you. As Tessa Bellamont, you are legally and financially untouchable in a way I can't guarantee. As this, it puts you in a circle no one, not even the federal government, can breach without a fight. He was offering me the one thing he owned that was truly powerful, his name. And I was terrified. Marriage. I breathed, the word tasting like ash. Rafe, the last man I married, he left me. He left me when I was 6 months pregnant, broke and terrified, because his family didn't approve of the situation. Marriage isn't a fortress to me. It's a piece of paper that means nothing. It's a cage I couldn't get out of. I can't. He listened, his expression softening, the desperation fading, replaced by a deep, profound understanding. He touched my cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't known had fallen. I am not him, he said, his voice low and firm. We don't do promises. In my family, not casual ones. We only make one. He held my gaze, his own unwavering. We don't promise love or happiness or riches. We promise presence. We promise to stay. That's the Bellamont promise. It's the only one my mother made my father, and the only one he ever kept. I'm not asking you to be a wife, Tessa. I'm promising to be a husband. There's no in between. Not for us. I was speechless, torn between the old terror and this new, terrifying, beautiful truth. I need to think, Rafe. It's too much. He nodded once. I know, but the offer stands. The false calm of our victory lasted exactly 12 hours. The next storm didn't come for me. It came for him. I woke to the sound of shouting, not in the apartment, but from Rafe's office. Onwin was there. Milo was on a speakerphone. The energy was frantic. He did it, Onwin said as I walked in, clutching my robe. Silas just filed his countermove. He didn't sue me, I said, confused. No, Rafe said. He was standing by the window, his back to me. He sued me. He sued Bellamont Logistics. Onwin's face was grim. He filed a massive antitrust injunction with the Crescent Port Council. He's accusing you of being the monopoly. He's using your silicon blockade as proof that you're engaging in racketeering to illegally crush a competitor. She pointed to her tablet. He's demanding the council suspend your operating license immediately. My blood ran cold. He's using the truth to tell a lie. It's brilliant, Rafe said, his voice dangerously quiet. It's what I would have done. His phone rang. He picked it up. Martin, yes, I saw it. You can't be serious. Suspend Martin. That's 5,000 jobs. 5,000 families. You're letting him, a man who's about to be indicted, dictate port policy. You can't be this much of a coward. He slammed his hand on the desk, the first uncontrolled rage I'd seen in days. Fine, I'll be there. He hung up, his jaw clenched. I watched him. The weight of his entire world, his mother's legacy, the lives of thousands of workers, had just landed on his shoulders. And it was my fault. I was the one who brought Silas into his orbit. This was my fight. Onwin, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Those letters, the ones from the dock workers' families, the ones whose kids are in Program Jasper, do you have them? Onwin looked at Rafe, then at me. Yes, I've been compiling them for the civil suit. Get them for me, I said, now. An hour later, I walked into the Port Council building, alone. Rafe was in his own car, headed for his own meeting, fighting his fight. I was going to fight mine. I didn't have an appointment. I walked straight past the secretary into Director Martin's office. "You can't go in there," she shrieked. "Director," I said, my voice shaking but loud. He looked up, a deer in the headlights. "Mrs. Morena, this is highly—" "Rafe Bellamont is on his way here to save his company," I said, dumping the stack of letters on his desk. "I'm here to save yours. That's a list of 50 families, all of whom work for Bellamont Logistics, all of whom had their children's names stolen by Silas Kincaid for Program Jasper. You are about to suspend the license of the only man who's been protecting them, at the request of the man who's been robbing them." I leaned in, my hands flat on his desk. "Do that. Make that choice, and I will personally stand on the steps of this building with Leora Penn, and I will read every single one of these letters to every news camera in this city. You will be known as the man who protected a monster and punished his victims. Your call." I walked out. I was back in the apartment, my heart still hammering. When Rafe returned, he walked in, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened. He just looked at me. "Your speech," he said, a small, tired smile touching his lips, "was effective. Martin was pale as a ghost. He's not suspending, not yet." A wave of relief so strong I almost collapsed. "But," he said, and the smile vanished, "he's trapped. Silas has him in a legal corner. He's giving us 48 hours. 48 hours for what? To provide definitive, irrefutable proof that Helios, not Bellamont, is the criminal entity manipulating the port. Proof he can take to the state. 48 hours, Tessa, or the port closes." The clock had started. We hit a wall. Hard. We had the Jasper data, but that was medical fraud. We had no proof of the corporate sabotage, the link between Silas and the NMIC, the bribes. The Eclipse Bell servers had been wiped clean. "He's going to win," I whispered, sinking onto the sofa. "He's going to walk away, and he's going to take you down with him." "Not yet." Leora Penn was at the door, Anwen letting her in. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright. "The raid was a bust, but he's arrogant. He wiped his main data, but he'd never destroy his insurance policy. I got a tip from an ex-Helios tech I've been cultivating. He keeps a private, air-gapped server, a full backup of everything. Corporate, bribes, personal." "Where?" Rafe asked, suddenly alive. "The St. Aurelia Archive," Leora said. Rafe's head snapped up. "The historical charity that's his mother's pet project. It's a massive tax shelter." "Exactly," Leora said. "It's buried in the sub-basement, shielded, unmarked. He calls it the Data Chapel. He thinks it's a sanctuary. He thinks it's untouchable." A slow, cold smile spread across Rafe's face. It was the smile I'd seen on the boat. It was the smile of his father. "Good," he said, his voice soft. "Anwen, Milo, get the gear, the cutting tools. We're going in tonight. No warrants, no feds. We're going to tear it out of the wall." "No." Rafe stopped, his hand in midair. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. "What did you say?" "No." I stood up, my legs shaking, and I walked straight up to him, planting myself between him and the door. "No, Rafe, look at me." He stared down at me, the rage coiled in his shoulders. "You told me," I said, my voice low and fierce, "that you were terrified of becoming your father. This is your father. This is the brute force. We have been one step ahead of Silas because we have been smarter than him. We've used the law. We've used the press. The second you put on a mask and cut through that door, you are no better. You become the criminal, and he wins. You lose the port. You lose the moral high ground, and you lose me. I will not stand by and watch you do it." The silence in the room was absolute. It was him and me, the final test. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling, the war raging behind his gray eyes. I didn't flinch. He closed his eyes. He took a single, shuddering breath. When he opened them, the rage was gone. His father was gone. It was just Rafe. "You're right," he whispered. His voice was rough. "She's right," Anwen said, her voice full of relief. "But there's a third way. We don't go in. We bring the law with us. The DUFI is furious that Silas walked. They are begging for a new target. Leora's informant, plus Tessa's testimony. That's enough for Judge Seal to sign a new warrant, a real one. I looked at Rafe. We do it right, I said. All the way to the end. No shortcuts. He searched my face, and I saw a profound, burning respect in his eyes. He reached out and cupped my jaw. You chose the law, he said, his voice hoarse. So I choose to stand right behind you. He leaned in and kissed me, not with passion, but with a deep, unbreakable promise. That's the vow. The final hours were a blur. Onwen on the phone with the DUFI, Milo on his laptop, mapping the archives network, me sitting at Judge Seal's dining table at 2 a.m, signing a new affidavit. I came back to the apartment just before dawn. Jonah was asleep, his Legos scattered on the rug. Rafe was kneeling, packing them carefully into their box. We move in an hour, he said quietly. Are we moving again, Mommy? Jonah's voice, sleepy, came from the doorway. I went to him, smoothing his hair. No, baby, we're just going on one last adventure, with Uncle Rafe. Rafe stood, his face serious. He knelt in front of Jonah. Listen to me, buddy. This is a big day. You're going to be with Mommy. And there are going to be a lot of people, a lot of lights. Your only job, he said, is to hold her hand as tight as you can. Don't let go, no matter what. Can you do that for me? Jonah nodded, his little face a mask of determination. Hold tight, I can do that. I looked at the desk, the signed warrant, the map of St. Aurelia. On Onwen's tablet, a digital clock was counting down. 12:00:00. 12 hours left. As the first pale gray light of dawn touched the city, the distant clear sound of the cathedral bells began to chime. The world was sharp and cold, the dawn cutting a gray-blue line across the horizon. The 48-hour clock was down to its final 12. I sat in the back of the Bentley, Jonah strapped into his car seat beside me, his small, warm hand clutching mine. Hold tight, I whispered, repeating the words Rafe had taught him. I am Mommy, he said, his voice serious, his gaze fixed on the man in the front seat. Rafe. He hadn't slept. He was a tightly coiled spring, his eyes, visible in the rearview mirror, sweeping every street, every intersection. We were not alone. We were a convoy, the Bentley, an armored SUV driven by Onwen in front of us, and 2 black vans full of federal agents from the Delta Unified Financial Investigations Office behind us. Leora Penn was in the passenger seat of the lead DUFI van, her camera authorized by the warrant. We were going to war, legally, in broad daylight. The St. Aurelia archive wasn't a shadowy warehouse. It was a beautiful, imposing marble building, a monument to old money and civic pride. And Silas's lawyers were already there, waiting on the steps, a wall of expensive, dark suits. This is a disgrace, the lead lawyer announced as the DUFI agent stepped forward. This warrant is invalid. This entire archive is protected under the Charitable Donation Secrecy Act. He held up a thick, pre-filed injunction. You are not setting one foot inside. The federal agent stopped, frustrated. The clock was ticking. I felt the hope in my chest begin to curdle. Silas was going to win. He'd wrapped himself in the law, like a mummy. A single black sedan, not part of our convoy, pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and Judge Armand Seal stepped out. He wasn't in his robes. He was in a sharp 3-piece suit, his face a mask of cold fury. He walked past the stunned lawyers, straight to the lead DUFI agent. Your injunction is noted, counsel, Judge Seal said, his voice booming in the quiet morning air. He handed the agent a single, fresh sheet of paper. And it is irrelevant, here is a superseding warrant signed by me 10 minutes ago. No privilege, no charitable status, and no secrecy act in this state provides a sanctuary for crimes against children. He turned his piercing gaze on the lead lawyer. The door will be opened, or I will have you arrested for obstruction of justice. Your choice. The door was opened. We descended into the sub-basement. It was cold, sterile, and smelled of ozone and dust, and there it was, the data chapel. It was a room walled in glass, like an exhibit, filled with rows of black servers, their small, blue indicator lights blinking like 1,000 unholy votive candles. "My God," Leora whispered, her camera rolling from the hallway. Milo, who had come with the feds, jacked his terminal into the main console. "I'm in," he hissed. "He's shielded, but he's not invisible. Tessa, what am I looking for?" "Program Jasper," I said, my voice steady. I moved to a secondary terminal. My fingers, trained by years of medical billing, flew across the keys. I found the root directory, I found the subfolders, and I found the file, Jasper_B children. My heart stopped. I pointed to the screen. "Milo," I whispered, "look at the timestamp." He read it aloud. "Last modified 0532 a.m. He looked at me, his face pale. This morning, he was still doing it. "He's arrogant." The voice came from behind us. I spun around. Silas Kincaid. He was standing in the doorway, flanked by his real legal team, his hands in his pockets. He was perfectly calm, an observer at his own execution. He wasn't under arrest. He was just here. "You chose to fight, Tessa," he said, his voice conversational. "You've caused so much damage. You've destroyed so much. And I have to ask, what's the result? What happens if I never go to jail? Was it worth it?" I didn't look at him. I looked at the screen. I saw Rafe, standing just behind me. A half step to my left, he was a silent wall of steel. His eyes locked on Silas, his body radiating a violence he was holding back with an iron will. He was letting me finish this. I didn't answer Silas. I just typed, "He's right, Rafe. The Jasper data is just medical fraud. It's not enough to stop the 48-hour clock." I kept typing. "But he's arrogant. He didn't just back up the fraud, he backed up everything." I hit enter. A new file tree appeared. NMIC_contributions. PDF. "What's that?" the DOFI agent snapped. "That," I said, my voice ringing with triumph, "is the bribery file. That's the list of donations from Helios to the personal accounts of the National Maritime Integrity Commission." I clicked it open. The scanned wire transfers filled the screen. "And that," I pointed, my finger shaking, "is the signature of his chief financial officer, authorizing the payment that funded the team that tried to abduct me." "We're downloading," Milo yelled. "He's fast." "Whoop, whoop, whoop." Red alarms flashed across the screens. "He's in," Milo shouted. "He triggered a remote wipe. A dead man's switch. The server is frying itself. I've got 92%. I need 60 seconds. I can't stop it." Rafe moved. It wasn't a decision. It was an explosion. His father's rage, the brute force. It was all there. He strode toward the main server rack, his hands grabbing the metal casing, ready to rip the hardware from the wall with his bare hands. "Rafe! No!" I screamed. My brain was working faster. Not on adrenaline, but on instinct. "You do that. You corrupt the drive, wait the UPS." I pointed to the massive black battery backup units in the corner. In hospitals, critical data is always on a battery backup. It's on a separate circuit. "Milo, bypass the main plug straight into the UPS." Milo didn't ask questions. He dove, ripping a cable from the wall and slamming it into the auxiliary port on the battery. The screen flickered and held. "Bypassed, I'm in. He can't fry the battery," Milo yelled. 99, 100%, we have the data, we have it all." The room was silent. The DFI lead agent looked at the screen. He looked at Silas. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Silas Kincaid," the agent said, his voice heavy. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery of a federal official, and obstruction of justice." The click of the cuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Silas's smile finally vanished. His face was a mask of pure, white disbelief. As the agents pulled him past, he stopped, his eyes locking on Rafe. "She made you weak," he hissed, his voice full of venom. Rafe looked at him, his face calm, the storm inside him finally at peace. He had won. We had won. "No," Rafe said, his voice quiet and clear. She made me choose a different kind of strong. We walked out of the archive into the blinding, beautiful mid-morning sun. My hand was in Rafe's. Jonah was holding my other hand. And the world had changed. A crowd was there, not reporters, workers, hundreds of them, in their blue Bellamont logistics uniforms and hard hats. They had shut down the port and walked here. When they saw Rafe, they didn't cheer. They raised their hats, a silent, profound salute. Anwen pushed through the crowd, her face split by a smile so wide I'd never seen anything like it. "The Port Council," she said, holding up her phone. "Martin just called. They voted unanimous. The suspension is canceled. They're launching a full-scale partnership investigation into Helios, with Bellamont Logistics as the lead consultant." Rafe's shoulders, which I realized had been holding the weight of 5,000 jobs, finally relaxed. He pulled me against his side. The rest of the day was a blur of good news. Judge Seal announced a massive victim compensation fund, paid for by the seized assets of Helios. A formal court order expunged every miner's name from the Jasper files. Jonah was free. My phone rang. It was Caleb. His voice was small, thin. "Tessa, my lawyers, I'm withdrawing the petition. My God, I'm facing my own charges. I didn't know." I closed my eyes, the last chain holding me to my old life. "Just be a father. Caleb," I said, my voice tired but kind. "If you want to see him, just be his dad. That's all I ever wanted." I hung up. The sun was setting. We weren't at a hotel. We weren't at Bellamont Row. We were on the docks, the real ones. The ones that smelled of salt and diesel and the open water. Jonah was running, chasing a seagull, his laughter echoing over the water. Rafe stood in front of me. The wind was pulling strands of my hair across my face. He wasn't kneeling, he wasn't holding a diamond ring. He was just there, in his hands. He held a single old-fashioned, heavy brass key. "My mother taught me to hate promises," he said, his voice low, "just for me. They're just words, but she believed in one. The one you keep not with words, but with blood and bone. The one that means you stay." He held the key out to me. "This is for Maison Bellamont, not the wedding hall. My home, the one my mother built." His gray eyes, no longer cold steel, but warm, like the harbor at sunset, held mine. "I'm not asking you to be my wife, Tessa. I'm not asking for a piece of paper." He paused, his voice rough. "I'm asking if you and Jonah, if you're ready to come home." My heart, which had been battered and broken and terrified, suddenly felt full, whole. I looked at the key. I looked at my son, laughing by the water. I looked at this impossible, dangerous, honorable man. I didn't take the key. I put my hand on top of his, closing his fingers around it, and then laced mine with his. "We're home," I whispered. He pulled me in. He kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, questioning kiss from the apartment. It was a kiss of arrival. It was a kiss of forever. It tasted like the rest of my life. I heard a small shout. "Mommy's kissing Uncle Rafe," Jonah cheered, clapping his small hands. Rafe's phone chimed in his pocket. He broke the kiss. A low laugh rumbling in his chest. He pulled it out. It was a text from Leora Penn. He showed me the screen. "Doofy just announced. It's over. Facing the data, Helios and all its subsidiaries have entered a full confession and guilty plea. They're done." The final knot untied. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that lit up his entire face. He put the phone away, wrapped both arms around my waist, and pulled me close. Right there on the docks, he began to move, slow, like the first time. Our first real dance, the first one that wasn't pretend. And as he kissed me again, I heard it, faint and sweet on the salty air. From somewhere in the quarter, a lone saxophone began to play. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We're so grateful to have you here. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.